Chapter 772. The palace maids who were asked by Gong Dai trembled in fear. Your Highness, the princess has a difficult birth. In her days, Gong Yimo heard this sentence and really wanted to scold herself for having such a cheap mouth. Gong Dai was also a little flustered. He saw that Gong Yimo's eyes were closed, and it was obvious that she did not have any strength left. The child's head still could not come out. He had no choice but to ask someone to find the old man. Fortunately, the old man was in the palace and came over immediately. He heard that Gong Yimo was having a difficult birth, so he thought of a way and gave Gong Dai medicine. Find a large wooden bucket and pour hot water into it. Then mix the medicine in and let that girl go into the water to give birth. Is this feasible? Gong Dai asked seriously. Let royal sister live alone? He felt that it was cruel just thinking about it. The old man blew his beard and glared. If you don't want it, return it to me. Gong Ju went to prepare for the meeting. He carefully carried Gong Yimo into the water. At this time, Gong Yimo was already a little weak. She suddenly said, If it's really a difficult birth. Gong Ju hurriedly stopped her. You'll be fine. His heart was beating very fast, but his tone was strangely calm. We've been through so much. Soon, we'll be happy. You'll be fine. We'll be together for a long, long time. Gong Yimo strangely quieted down. Gong Dai, she suddenly said, bring the ginseng soup over. Gong Dai's eyes lit up, and he quickly ordered someone to bring the ginseng soup. After being carried into the water, Gong Yimo suddenly felt a little better. Gong Dai stood by the bucket with a serious expression. Royal sister, for me, for our child. Gong Yimo no longer had the strength to nod. After drinking the ginseng soup, she let out a long sigh. After her mind cleared up, she began to circulate her inner energy. It was too painful just now. She was afraid that she would go berserk if she tried to circulate her inner strength. But now, after she felt a little better, she could operate normally. Her body gradually produced some strength. She sat in the water, and the basin of water instantly turned into blood. No one could help. They could only watch helplessly. They were very nervous. If something happened to the princess, they would not be able to live. However, none of them were as nervous as Gong Dai. In front of him was the woman he loved. Their child was about to be born. His heart was in a mess. He didn't know what he was looking forward to or what he was hating. In the end, when he saw Gong Yimo's overly pale face, all his emotions turned into heartache. After this child was born, he would never want any more children. Time continued to flow, but Gong Yimo didn't make a sound. Only her wrinkled, beautiful face showed that she was enduring silently, and only the sweat on her forehead showed how uncomfortable she was right now. Gong Dai saw that her lips were getting whiter and whiter, and he couldn't help but whisper in her ear, Royal sister, do you still remember? When we were young, you said that having a child with close relatives is very likely to be deformed. Gong Dai tried his best to make his voice calm and not sound so tense. At that time, I said, if you don't want to have a child, can you be together with close relatives? At this moment, the palace servants in the room looked over and listened quietly. Their expressions were somewhat moved. You said, the world is so big. Why do we have to find close relatives? At this point, Gong Dai smiled bitterly. At that time, I thought, what if we have to be close relatives, royal sister? I have only wanted you since we were young. It was said that deep love was the most moving. Although these palace servants were loyal to Gong Dai and Gong Yimo, in their hearts, they didn't recognize the blood relationship between Gong Dai and Gong Yimo. But now, when they heard the usually cold-faced prince recount the past word by word, their hearts were moved. They only felt that with the depth of love, what did it matter if they weren't related? When Gong Dai saw that Gong Yimo's expression seemed to have softened a little, his heart leaped with joy as he spoke again. Royal sister, do you still remember when you came to find me in Shi province? At that time, I tried my best to find you, but I didn't expect you to come before me. At that time, I hugged you as if I was hugging everything. A trace of sweetness appeared at the corner of his mouth. You don't know, right? After you fell asleep, I kissed you for the second time. You were so captivating that I couldn't extricate myself. I thought that after I left you, I would gradually forget and give up on this relationship that I shouldn't have. But the moment you appeared, I knew that I would never forget you in this lifetime. You are a seductress. You held me tightly and pulled me down with you. I had no choice but to pull you down with me. Do you think I'm very bad? Gong Yimo pursed her lips. Gong Dai knew that she heard everything. There are too many. Royal sister, when we're old, let's share these memories with our children. Let's share them for the rest of our lives, okay? Gong Yimo suddenly groaned. At that moment, the water in the wooden bucket surged because of Gong Yimo's inner energy. She was trying her best. Finally, Gong Dai heard a sound, and at that moment, Gong Yimo didn't know where she got the strength from. She used her inner energy to cut the umbilical cord and carried a baby out with both hands. The moment the baby came into contact with air, Gong Yimo felt him tremble and then let out a loud cry. At that moment, everyone heaved a sigh of relief. Gong Dai even carried the baby away at the first moment. He wailed loudly. That sound seemed to be announcing to the world that he was here. Gong Dai didn't know how to describe his feelings. His heart was beating very fast, as if it was going to jump out of his mouth. He looked at the baby and then looked at Gong Yimo. At that moment, he finally understood what Royal Sister wanted to say to him previously. Nature, other than balance, was the most important thing. It was life. It created life. Life. What a magical word. So this was the mystery of nature. Wind and nature. He finally had an epiphany. A gust of wind suddenly appeared in the house. What was strange was that the wind had a hint of white. It was gentle, and it surrounded the entire house. Everyone felt their fatigue disappear, and Gong Yimo fell into a deep sleep amidst the gentle wind. Even the baby seemed to have felt something gentle. He stopped crying and obediently fell asleep, sleeping between his father's hands. The old man was originally listening to the commotion outside, but he felt that something was amiss. He then smiled. Who would have thought that this kid would actually comprehend the 9th level at such a time? Could it be that there was really no need to cut off all feelings and love? What was the true meaning that he had comprehended? Gong Yimo vaguely felt that Gong Dai was different, but she was too tired. Before she could open her eyes, she fell asleep. The last thing she saw was the fluttering black hair in the wind. Whose hair was that? It looked like Gong Dai had comprehended the 9th level. Back then, Gong Dai's every advancement was very shocking. This was the first time he was so gentle, right? With a smile, Gong Yimo slept soundly. She felt that her life was complete. Chapter 773. By the time Gong Yimo woke up, it was already a few days later. She really had a difficult labor. In order not to hurt the child, she had chosen the most gentle and painful method. However, her body was different from ordinary people. The moment the child was born, the waste in her body was instantly discharged. She did not have the dispirited feeling of a pregnant woman in confinement. Instead, she was full of vitality and radiant from the inside out. In short, in just a few days, she had recovered as if she had never given birth. Moreover, she looked even younger. The old man smacked his lips. He did not expect the place of the transformative stage to have such an effect. He could not be blamed for being surprised. Since ancient times, there were not many strong practitioners of the transformative stage, and even fewer women. The old man dared to say that the only woman who could reach the transformative stage before the age of 20 was Gong Yimo. Therefore, he found Gong Yimo very rare. Before waking up, Gong Yimo first heard a soft sobbing sound. It was tender and obviously the sound of a baby. She slowly opened her eyes. In a daze, she saw a smear of black. That shiny black hair showed that the person who was very close to her was a very young person. Then, she looked at his face and realized that he was still wearing a mask. What was going on? Could it be that everything before she fainted was an illusion? Gong Dai did not break through to the 9th level? Ugh! Hearing Gong Yimo's voice, Gong Dai hurried to her side, holding a child firmly in his arms. Gong Yimo blinked. She looked at him and then at the child. This was her child? But this was not the main point. The main point was whether Gong Dai had broken through to the 9th level or not. Gong Dai motioned for Gong Yimo to keep quiet. He handed the child to the palace servants and then brought the medicine for Gong Yimo to drink. After drinking the medicine, Gong Yimo felt much better. Normally, at this time, she would say, "Bring the child over for me to see." But Gong Yimo was different. She asked everyone to leave because she wanted to see Gong Dai's face. When Gong Dai saw her actions, he knew that she had misunderstood. He chuckled. "Do you know why I'm still wearing a mask?" Gong Yimo had just woken up, so she couldn't sense whether Gong Dai had recovered or not. She had thought of the worst-case scenario, which was that Gong Dai didn't succeed in his epiphany. In addition, she hadn't helped the old man perform acupuncture on Gong Dai for a few days, so Gong Dai had become even older. "It's okay. I can take it." Her face was serious. Gong Dai couldn't help but laugh. "What should I do? I've become older now, but you've become younger after giving birth. I don't dare to show it to you." Gong Yimo frowned. She did feel that her body was lighter, but she did not know how it felt. Now that she heard Gong Dai's words, she said seriously, "I've said it before. No matter what you look like, I'll like you." Gong Dai's upper body moved closer to her. His black hair slanted, which made Gong Yimo a little confused. However, she had never doubted Gong Dai. She only heard him say in a low voice, "If I'm so old that I can't do it anymore, will you still want me?" Gong Yimo's face flushed red. Why was Gong Dai so indecent? Could it be that he was too sad and things would go in the opposite direction when they reached an extreme? She held Gong Dai's hand and said word by word, "I've said it before. In this life, I'll only love you. Even if you're old, I'm willing to protect you and never leave you." Gong Dai was silent. His black, jade-like eyes were filled with warmth, as seductive as a ray of light. Gong Yimo was also stunned by that ray of light. She asked softly, "Now, can I take off your mask?" Gong Dai did not say anything. He only looked at her with a smile. The warm spring sunlight shone in through the window, making the whole room seem to be covered in a layer of light. Time was peaceful. Seeing that he did not object, Gong Yimo reached out to take off his mask. At that moment, her movements were very slow. She was also very serious in her heart. No matter what he looked like, she just hoped that Gong Dai would not be too sad. Who knew? Gong Yimo saw a corner of his white and tender face. She was slightly shocked. Then, she reached out and took off his entire mask. The person in front of her had a handsome face, thin lips, and a high nose. At first glance, he looked cold, but the gentleness in his eyes was especially rare. Most importantly, he was very young. Seeing that Gong Yimo was stunned, Gong Dai could not help but smile. His smile was like a snow lotus blooming. It was a combination of coldness and charm. There was a kind of fairy-like beauty. "Are you satisfied with what you see?" Wasn't this line a little too familiar? After Gong Yimo came back to her senses, she fiercely pushed him down and quickly got into character. "You annoying little vixen. How dare you lie to me?" Gong Dai was stunned for a moment, then he smiled again. "I just wanted to tease you. After all, Royal Sister looks very cute when she changes her expression." Gong Yimo's cheeks puffed up in anger as she pressed against him. Although she was angry, she could not suppress the joy in her heart. "Yes, I think you're very cute now too. Bastard, accept your punishment." With that, Gong Yimo went to tickle Gong Dai. Gong Dai could naturally tolerate it, so he let her do as she pleased. Gong Yimo widened her eyes. "Emph, a person who is not afraid of tickles doesn't dote on his wife. You must be a jerk." Gong Dai could not help but reach out and hug her. "Don't you know whether I dote on you or not?" Gong Yimo pursed her lips and snorted arrogantly. The two of them fooled around on the bed, full of laughter. "Gong Dai, we'll always be together, right?" Gong Ju looked at her flushed and nervous face and chuckled softly. "We'll be together for a long, long, long time." Gong Yimo pretended to be distressed. "So long. What if I get tired of it?" Gong Dai pretended to be angry, but then he sighed and said, "Then I'll have to chase after you again and get you back." It wasn't easy for the two of them to finally be together without any worries. It was a hardship that ordinary people couldn't understand, but it was all worth it. They truly had each other. But at this moment, a loud cry suddenly came from outside the door. Gong Yimo was stunned. Only then did she realize that she was about to give birth to a child. And, because of this child, the life that she wanted with the two of them might end just as it started. Then, it would become a three-person world. No way. When Gong Dai heard the child crying, he immediately stopped fooling around and got someone to bring the child in. At this rate, Gong Yimo felt that she would soon fall out of favor. Gong Dai did not notice Gong Yimo's resentful gaze. Seeing that she was staring at him, he handed the child to her. You haven't taken a good look at him. Gong Dai was full of satisfaction and joy. It's our son. When he grows up, we'll protect you. Gong Yimo was still in a dilemma when Gong Dai suddenly gave her a child. She rejected it in her heart. Because so many things had happened when she was pregnant, she had never settled down to experience the true meaning of being a mother. Later, when she was about to give birth, Gong Dai had gotten into an accident. She was even more focused on another person. Until now, she had not been able to get into the role. Chapter 774. She recalled a report she had once read about why some women did not like children at first, but after giving birth to them, they would like them very much. The truth was that after they got married, they were not happy. They gradually realized that their husbands and families were far from what they had imagined. Only their children belonged to them completely. Their love was too illusory. Gong Yimo did not understand how she felt now. She felt that compared to her husband, she liked her husband more. Could it be because Gong Dai fulfilled all her fantasies and expectations? Therefore, after being stuffed by the child, she was a little at a loss. The child also cried very unwillingly. When Gong Dai saw how flustered Gong Yimo was, he could not help but chuckle. You can't hug like this. You have to do this. He patiently corrected Gong Yimo's actions. Sure enough, the little guy stopped crying. His face was red, but he had a feeling that in a few days, he would grow very beautiful. Feeling the incredible softness and warmth in her hands, Gong Yimo was stunned. She could not help but pinch the baby's butt. This was so soft that it was boneless. She even felt that if she used a little more strength, she would break him. This was too scary. But there was something else that was scary. For example, a kind of close warmth and softness, as if a small hammer was gently hitting her heart. This was her son. What is his name? Gong Yimo stuttered. She stuttered when she was nervous, and Gong Dai knew that too. What do you want to call him? This stumped Gong Yimo. A person was like his name. She could name him randomly before, but after giving birth to a child, she could not bear to name him randomly. Gong. Chiyu? What do you think of this name? Gong Dai repeated in a low voice. Chiyu? This name is very good. Gong Yimo was immediately happy. He still needs a nickname. Her eyes darted around. Why don't we call him Xiao Tuanzi? When I first picked him up, he was just a small ball. Gong Dai followed her wishes and called him Xiao Tuanzi. Now that their nicknames were confirmed, the little dumpling began to cry again. It seemed that he was hungry. Gong Yimo was a little embarrassed. She wanted to take off her clothes and feed him, but when she touched herself, she realized that she was a little big. But, what should I do, Gong Dai? I realized that I don't have milk. Gong Dai was amused by her tearful expression. What else did you discover? Only then did Gong Yimo realize that her stomach was gone. When he touched it, it was actually flat. In just a few days, it had actually recovered to its original state. Did she really give birth to a child? Gong Dai saw that she was confused, so he gently handed the crying child to the wet nurse. Perhaps this is the benefit of the place of the outer fringe? Gong Yimo was in a daze. So I don't have to go through confinement? That seems to be the case. Gong Yimo cheered softly. I don't have to go on a diet either? Gong Dai whispered suggestively in her ear. Not only that, Royal Sister's body is still as fair as ever. There were no stretch marks that she was worried about. Gong Yimo's face flushed red, so she grabbed his ear and whispered it back, unwilling to be outdone. So tonight, you can? Gong Dai blushed at her words. After all, from the beginning until now, they had already given birth to a child, but it had only happened 5 times. Gong Dai was young and impetuous, so he couldn't withstand such teasing. "We'll talk about it when you're better." He was angry, but there were people around him. Moreover, although Royal Sister was recovering well, she might not be able to have sex. He should endure it for a while more anyway. He had endured it for so long. Gong Yimo secretly smiled when she heard him gnashing his teeth. It would be good if they could continue like this. Thus, Gong Yimo spent a month happily in this sweet and pampered environment. Recently, she was in high spirits and prepared to pull Gong Dai to do something indescribable, but Gong Dai disappeared. When she pulled him to ask, he only said that the Prince Regent was busy. Gong Yimo curled her lips and helplessly went to play with the baby. It just so happened that the baby had grown up recently and was quite fun to play with. However, he only knew how to sleep, and then he kept blowing bubbles. There wasn't much to play with, but he was soft and delicate, so it felt good to the touch. Gong Yimo's favorite thing to do was to bully him. When he was drinking milk, she would disturb him, and when he was full, she would play with him on the bed until he cried. Her ruthless behavior made the wet nurse strongly dissatisfied, but after a few times, the princess still did as she pleased, so the wet nurse went to complain to the prince. At this time, Gong Dai was busy decorating the wedding hall. When he heard the wet nurse's words, he didn't know whether to laugh or cry. One was his son, and the other was his beloved wife. Of course, the wife was more important. Thus, Gong Dai coldly said, "Boys aren't that delicate." The wet nurse silently went to secretly bite her handkerchief. From this, one could foresee how rough the little prince's future life would be. Of course, this was all for later. At this time, Gong Yimo was watching a good show at the city gates. It turned out that Gong Dai had tortured those Japanese enough and let them go. However, the boat they came on had long been destroyed, so they could only live in Dayu State for the rest of their lives and could never go back. Even if they lived in Dayu State, they would have a lower status. Gong Yimo thought they were going to jump again, but she didn't know what they had suffered in Zhao prison, but they were all very well behaved. Seeing that they were miserable, Gong Yimo didn't make trouble for them. After all, they were just grasshoppers after autumn and couldn't cause much trouble. To Gong Yimo's surprise, people from India came. Because none of the Dayu State's monarchs believed in Buddhism, there were Buddhist temples and even more Taoist sects in Dayu State, but they weren't popular. After all, this was an era of rapid development. The 4 countries were connected to each other, and roads were opened. All the industries were flourishing. As long as one was smart and hardworking, they could make a lot of money. Under these circumstances, who would still believe in some religion? It wasn't as important as money, especially when the 4 countries issued a decree at the same time to maintain 100 years of peace. The commoners were overjoyed. In the past, when Liu Ye's people came to Dayu State, they would definitely be looked down upon. They would have to be sneaky to avoid being misunderstood as plotting something. Now, there was no need for that. Dayu State welcomed Liu Ye's people very much. They were straightforward and generous, and the furs they brought were of good quality. There was no pressure to interact with them. In the past, when people from Dayu State went to Yuheng, they were arrogant, and some people from Yuheng didn't like it. But now, people from Yuheng knew that people from Dayu State liked to show off. They just needed to let them show off. People from Dayu State were actually very kind, and so on and so forth. Therefore, under the general trend, Buddhism, Taoism, and some other religions weren't flourishing in the mainland. Chapter 775. This time, the Indian team was here to preach the teachings of Buddhism. Gong Dai did not deny it and allowed them to reach the capital. Along the way to Shangjing, the Indian team witnessed the wealth and culture of the Dayu State. It was completely different from what they had imagined. As their civilization was older than the mainland, they had looked down on it before they came. But now, they only felt a deep sense of inferiority. Of course, the ones who felt inferior were the officials who accompanied them. The eminent monks who had Buddhism in their hearts did not show it. When they arrived, Gong Dai received them. As there were still Buddhists in the Dayu state, Gong Dai took the opportunity to give them some face. When they saw Gong Dai, they were very surprised. Along the way, they had seen many people in power, but this was the first time they saw someone as young and handsome as Gong Dai. Moreover, his dignified aura and his domineering manner made him worthy of being the ruler of a powerful country in the mainland. Everyone nodded in their hearts and spoke of their purpose for coming. The one who spoke was the official. What was surprising was that he spoke well in the Dayu state. After introducing himself and the others, the man named Wooks went straight to the point. Honorable Holy Lord of the Dayu state, I am here to preach the teachings of Buddhism, enlighten the people, and build Buddhist temples and pagodas. Gong Dai did not deny it. This group of people had come from afar, so it was not a big deal for him to build a few Buddhist temples for them. Also, I have brought our seeds and books to show my sincerity. I hope the Holy Lord will not reject them. Gong Dai was quite happy about this. When they saw that Gong Dai was not as intimidating as before, and that his expression had softened, the group of people heaved a sigh of relief. It seemed like this was an easygoing ruler. Just as they were about to say something, they heard a woman's voice coming from afar. Gong Dai, Gong Dai. Everyone looked over and saw a woman in a pink dress running over. Her face was delicate, and she was in high spirits. Her cheerful voice showed how happy she was. His whole body was like a warm cloud, floating over. Seeing so many people in front of her, not only did they look very representative, there were also a few monks. Gong Yimo immediately knew that they were from India, but she was used to being casual. After nodding her head and greeting them, she rushed towards Gong Dai. If it were anyone else, no matter how much they doted on her, they would tell her to pay attention to the occasion. After all, in this era, spoiling a woman too much was a disgraceful thing. But Gong Dai, everything he did was for the sake of his royal sister. How could he bear to see her suffer? What happened? Gong Dai asked softly. Seeing Gong Yimo running with a flushed face, he hurriedly hugged her, fearing that she would trip. Gong Yimo stuck out her tongue and her eyes lit up. It's all because of you. Recently, you've been elusive, so I had no choice but to come here and find you. Seeing how angry she was, Gong Dai's heart itched. He had been abstinent for a long time. Now that his royal sister was out of her confinement period, could he endure it a little longer, at least until the wedding? The moment the couple met, they completely ignored everyone else. The monks frowned slightly but didn't say anything. The leading official, Wu Si, spoke with some dissatisfaction. Holy Lord of Dayu State, now is the time for discussion between the two countries. It's very inappropriate for your country to let a woman appear and disrupt the discussion. Gong Dai glanced at him coldly. She is this prince's wife, and she is as intelligent as her husband. Unexpectedly, this made the other party even more dissatisfied. The man with the aquiline nose frowned. Does this mean that your country allows women to receive education? Gong Dai raised his brows slightly. Why not? Of course not, he said angrily. Women should stay at home to give birth and take care of the household. A good girl with good character shouldn't expose herself to the outside world. Gong Yimo raised her brows in displeasure. Are you insulting me? That person said sternly. This official is just stating facts. He didn't understand. They had been to many small countries along the way, but the women there were very polite and knew their place. He didn't expect that a powerful country like Dayu State would be so muddle-headed, so he couldn't help but advise. Holy Lord of Dayu State, you should stop this unwise behavior. An educated woman will develop a suspicious personality. This way, they won't be able to adjust themselves in a united family, and it will cause disharmony between the family and the country. Gong Dai frowned. But before he could say anything, Gong Yimo couldn't help but laugh. So you're saying that you're blaming the women for the disharmony between the family and the country? Dare I ask, on what basis do you say that your way of thinking is right and our country's way of doing things is wrong? Wu Si didn't seem to expect Gong Yimo to be so clever. After all, the women he came into contact with were all timid and slow-witted. On the basis that I've been to 13 countries, the women of each country abided by the rules of etiquette as if they were subjects of the country. In other words, Only their country was different. Therefore, they were wrong. Gong Yimo laughed again. Perhaps this is the reason why they're poor and our country is rich. Her shameless words shocked the other party. This woman was actually attributing the country's wealth to herself? Before he could say anything, Gong Yimo raised her brows and said, "Could it be that you've seen countries that are richer than ours on your way here? If so, I'll admit that what I said just now was wrong." Wu Si frowned. She really hadn't. Seeing that his own man was being led by the nose, the other party's monk suddenly stepped forward and chanted a Buddhist prayer. "Benefactress, please forgive him." Unexpectedly, the leading monk, Dayu State, spoke even better. Gong Yimo's gaze fell on him and realized that he was a middle-aged man with a kind face and an ordinary appearance. "What advice does the great master have for me?" Gong Yimo asked lazily. "I don't dare to call myself a master. This poor monk is in the elementary profound realm and is just an ordinary monk." Benefactress's words are reasonable. "We've offended you." He spoke kindly and sincerely apologized. However, Gong Yimo still felt that he was strange. Hearing his words, she said softly, "In that case, I'll forgive you. I hope you remember that some words are not to be spoken carelessly. Although you're here to spread the teachings, you should learn to respect and learn first." Not only did they not listen to Gong Yimo's words, the man called Wu Si was even a little angry. Gong Dai saw this and was already displeased with this group of people. As the saying goes, those who walk different paths cannot make plans together. It's better to send them away as soon as possible and let them go find Kim Yun. Wu Si was still angry at first, but when he thought of the important matter, he endured it. However, towards Gong Dai, he no longer had the respect he had before. A husband who couldn't even control his own woman was not worthy of respect. This was his philosophy. Chapter 776. I'm here for another important matter. Wu's glanced at Gong Yimo. "Please dismiss your attendants." Gong Dai was about to refuse when Gong Yimo giggled. "Gong Dai, I haven't met an eminent monk before. How about this? I'll go out with the other monk for a walk. You guys can continue your discussion." Wu's curled his lips in disdain when he heard that she wanted to talk to Master Chu Xian. Master Chu Xian was an eminent monk. How could a woman like her meet him? Who knew that Chu Xian would agree? Chu Xian is honored. Gong Yimo winked at Gong Dai before leaving with Chu Xian and the others. Gong Dai was reluctant to part with them, and his expression darkened when he saw Wu's. "Is there anything else you want?" Seeing Gong Dai's cold expression, Wu's felt that it was because of that woman. He was displeased, but he couldn't do anything because of Gong Dai's powerful aura. "I hope that the Holy Lord of Dayu State is willing to convert to Buddhism." Gong Dai was stunned. He thought he heard wrong. Did this person want him to become a monk? After Gong Yimo pulled Chu Xian and the others out, she brought them to the garden. It was early spring, and everything was full of vitality. The garden was exquisitely built. There were mountains, rivers, pavilions, and corridors. Everything was beautiful. It was a work of the gods that they had never seen before. "May I know why Benefactor wants to bring us out?" The others didn't seem to speak Dayu State's language, so they were very quiet along the way. Gong Yimo giggled. "Let me guess. You didn't come here to preach because you wanted to build more temples in Dayu State, right?" Chu Xian was stunned, then smiled. "Benefactor is smart." Gong Yimo blinked. "Then wouldn't it be awkward for you people to talk about the secular world? That's why I brought you out. No need to thank me." Chu Xian was a little surprised that Gong Yimo would say that. His eyes flashed with a trace of haze, but it was so fast that no one could catch it. Gong Yimo pretended not to notice anything wrong with him and continued. "I heard that in the Buddhist scriptures, there is a saying that a man has 7 treasures and a woman has 5 leeks. It sounds quite unfair to women. Master, can you tell me which 5 leeks a woman has?" Chu Xian seemed to be a little restless. He frowned and said softly, "The 5 leeks body refers to Paladine, lust, cowardice, jealousy, vexation." Gong Yimo pursed her lips and smiled. "From the looks of it now, it's not only women who have the 5 leaky bodies. Master, don't you think that your demands are too much and that you're already greedy and jealous? Her voice gradually turned cold. It sounded like a warning. If Grandmaster has any thoughts about Daiyu State, I think Grandmaster will be very troubled in the end. After all, I am a suspicious woman who will cause unrest in the country. Only then did Chu Xian realize that this woman was not only smart, but also able to see through people's hearts. When they first came, they did not have such greedy thoughts. However, after seeing so much poverty and the prosperity of Daiyu State, they could no longer maintain their original intentions. Everyone had their own ambitions. Wuxi wanted to obtain Daiyu State's support, exchange culture, and bring back technology and treasures. However, he only wanted to build Buddhist temples on this rich land. But now, he suddenly felt a little scared. Wuxi's words made Gong Dai smile. Why? Why should this prince become a monk? Wuxi smiled respectfully. Holy Lord of Daiyu State, you may not know this, but only when the monarch believes in a certain religion can that religion be respected. The principles of Buddhism are to teach people to accumulate virtue and do good deeds. This can restrain the people's thoughts, purify the country's atmosphere, reduce crime, and make the people more obedient to your rule. After he finished speaking, he straightened his body slightly so that Gong Dai could look him in the eye. There are many benefits, so why not? Gong Dai tapped his fingers on the table, deep in thought. Wuxi thought that Gong Dai was tempted, so he spoke even more urgently. When the time comes, Holy Lord of Daiyu State only needs to express your stance and let the people know that you believe in Buddhism. Master Chu Xian will preach the true meaning of Buddhism in Daiyu State to achieve your goal. Holy Lord of Daiyu State does not need to do anything. Gong Dai raised his eyebrows slightly and smiled. As the regent of Daiyu State, his every action could affect tens of thousands of people. It could be said that once he believed in Buddhism, those officials would rush to imitate him. Those wealthy families who wanted to curry favor with the officials would also rush to imitate him. The ordinary people would also be greatly affected. Wuxi's plan was well thought out. He said that he only needed to express his stance, but his stance was the stance of the millions of people in Daiyu State. And the benefits he received were to make it easier for the people to control him? Wuxi was still trying to persuade him. I heard that there are many internal conflicts within the imperial family, and there are often riots among the people. These are all caused by greed. From this, it can be seen that only by having pure thoughts can one completely eliminate the hidden dangers. The price Daiyu State has to pay for this is only to build a few Buddhist temples so that Master Chu Xian can preach Buddhism better. Holy Lord of Daiyu State, what are you still thinking about? Wuxi spoke lightly, but in his heart, he was thinking that if he could really use Buddhism to invade and make the people of Daiyu State listen to him, then those Buddhist temples and pagodas would become capital that he could use to bring endless benefits to his state. Gong Dai sneered. Daiyu State does not need to trouble your state. Wuxi was stunned. He did not expect the region of Daiyu State to instinctively reject him like this. This was because the temptation of strengthening the notice was not small. Along the way, many state emperors had chosen to cooperate with them. Why was it that when they reached Daiyu State, they were rejected? Holy Lord of Daiyu State, what do you mean by this? Gong Dai raised his eyebrows slightly. Daiyu State has good weather. The country is prosperous and the people are at peace. The people have enough food and clothing. They do not need this king to restrain them. They will know their place. That's not right. Wuxi laughed dryly. People's desires cannot be eradicated. You have to know that they always want more. Gong Dai shook his head. There are a few people whose desires are endless. As he spoke, he looked at Wuxi with a smile that was not a smile. But most people are smart. They know what kind of life is best for them. Therefore, those who have endless desires will not receive the help of others. It is difficult for them to do it alone. Wuxi was somewhat dissatisfied. Along the way, the foreign ministers have all been willing to cooperate with us. The monks have stayed in different countries and will be put in important positions by them. It can be seen that most people feel that restraining the people is a very important matter. Gong Dai could not help but recall Gong Yimo's words and sneered. Because they are poor, Wu Si was speechless. Because they were poor, those states could not satisfy the desires of the people. They were also afraid that the people would riot. Therefore, they made such a decision. However, Daiyu state did not need it. The reality was so clear. Gongdai even said a few words with bad intentions. If you follow the horse path, you will be able to reach Yuheng from Daiyu state. Why don't you try going to Yuheng? Chapter 777. Seeing that Gong Dai didn't move at all, Wu's was a little annoyed. He thought angrily in his heart, a ruler who is bewitched by a woman might not be far from being destroyed. Are there any lack of such examples since ancient times? However, he was the one asking for help after all. Seeing that Gong Dai refused, he could only settle for the next best thing. Then please allow us to set up a banquet in the city and preach Buddhism, Holy Lord of Daiyu State. Gong Dai felt that there was nothing wrong with it, so he allowed it. On the other side, Master Chu Xian also came in. However, this time, he looked embarrassed, as if he still remembered the girl's threat with a smile. If you guys are obedient, then it's fine. But if you guys aren't obedient, I guarantee that your plans will all fail. She smiled, revealing her white teeth, and said so indecently. When Chu Xian saw Wu's expression, he knew that Wu's proposal didn't come to fruition. He couldn't help but feel a little annoyed. Their journey was smooth sailing, but they actually hit a snag in Daiyu State. They looked at each other and then retreated. Gong Yimo ran in again. Gong Dai, let's go play? She hugged him tightly. Gong Dai was very satisfied to see her, but he didn't forget the wedding plan. So he didn't have much time to play with her, even though he really wanted to. Why do you want me to play with you? Where are Xiaoqi and the others? In order to not let the royal sister discover his plan, didn't he ask Xiaoqi to watch over the royal sister and play with her everywhere? Gong Yimo thought of Luo Xiaoqi and the others and wanted to laugh. I got someone to make them drink a little last night. I'm afraid they're still not awake. Humph, those guys are too inexperienced to keep an eye on me. Gong Dai had a headache. What about Chiyu? Is the little dumpling not fun anymore? Gong Chiyu would probably cry in the toilet when he grew up because he had such parents. Gong Yimo stuck out her tongue. It's not like you don't know. That little guy is so funny when he cries. When I came back just now, I accidentally made him cry again. Thinking of the wet nurse's tearful complaint, Gong Dai pinched Gong Yimo's nose. So you came here to avoid trouble? Gong Yimo snuggled into Gong Dai's arms. No, I just missed you so much. In short, she sounded so aggrieved, as if Gong Dai had bullied her. With a look from Gong Dai, the surrounding palace servants all retreated. Gong Yimo pretended not to notice and continued to complain. I fell out of favor after I gave birth to the baby. You didn't love me or the baby. This accusation was too serious. If he didn't want to give her a surprise, why would Gong Dai have to endure for so long? But it didn't matter. It would only be a few days. Gong Dai suppressed the restlessness in his heart and held down her naughty little hands. Gong Yimo looked up and met his dangerous eyes. Her heart palpitated slightly. Stop fooling around. He looked at the lovely person who was so close to him. How can I not love you? Presumably, any woman who saw Gong Dai's eyes at this moment would know that he was telling the truth. However, Gong Yimo snickered in her heart and looked up at him with a pair of big eyes. If you love me, you have to hug me tighter. Gong Dai had no choice but to hug her tighter with both hands. Gong Yimo sensed his inevitable reaction and smiled naughtily. Then kiss me again. Stop fooling around. Gong Dai's voice was not very convincing. He had already endured so much by hugging her. If he kissed her again, he would definitely not be able to restrain himself. No, no. I want to kiss you. Gong Yimo shamelessly acted cute. Her body intentionally or unintentionally teased him and succeeded in making his reaction even more intense. Damn it! Gong Dai suddenly frowned and took a deep breath. However, he still had a trace of rationality. If I kiss you, you will let me go? Gong Yimo nodded vigorously. Her expression was so seductive. Gong Dai's Adam's apple moved, and he finally pressed down on her. However, Just as their lips touched, Gong Yimo instantly turned the tables and pressed Gong Dai onto the chair behind him. Gong Dai wanted to dodge, but how could Gong Yimo agree? Both of them were in the transcendent state, but could Gong Dai really use his inner strength to push Gong Yimo away? His heart was beating fast. After struggling for a while, he stopped and let himself be entangled with her. The sound of rapid panting and the passionate action of wanting to merge with the other person's body instantly ignited all of his rationality. After kissing deeply for a while, Gong Dai could not take it anymore. He carried Gong Yimo and hurried to the side room to rest. Gong Yimo was kissed until her face was red and her eyes were watery. However, she did not forget to mock Gong Dai. "Hubby, you're not busy anymore?" Gong Dai strode to the bed and said through gritted teeth, "No matter how busy I am, I will take care of you." Gong Yimo's soft and boneless hands ignited his body. "Take care of me? I'm in the transcendent state. It's hard for me to be full." This sentence undoubtedly made Gong Dai's eyes burn even more. He threw Gong Yimo onto the bed and pressed her down forcefully. His thin lips moved and he smiled wickedly. "What a coincidence. I'm also in the transcendent state. It's hard for me to be satisfied too. You have to try your best today." Gong Yimo wrapped her arms around his neck and winked at him with tipsy eyes. "Don't talk nonsense. Let's see who's better in bed." With one hand, Gong Ju tore her clothes to shreds, but his mouth still spoke gently. "Yes, my princess." Both of them were extremely passionate and soon got to the point. Gong Dai groaned uncontrollably and said strangely, "Royal sister, why do you look like you've never given birth before?" This really put him in a difficult position. Could this be the reason why you had a difficult birth? This was great. Was she going to give birth to the next child? It was better not to. Gong Dai felt that his life would be shortened if they did it again. Gong Yimo glared at him, but her face was uncontrollably red. "Maybe it's because I'm in the transcendent state. I was a little worried about this before." Gong Dai mischievously moved twice, causing Gong Yimo to pant. "Are you still worried now?" Gong Yimo narrowed her eyes. "Of course I'm worried. I'm worried that I'm too powerful and you can't do it." A fierce glint flashed across Gong Dai's eyes, which eventually turned into a smile. "Don't worry. You'll know who can't do it." Thus, the two people with the highest status in Dayu state not only engaged in lewd acts in broad daylight, but also continued to do it in spite of the strange looks from the crowd. When the officials heard this, they thought, His Highness is indeed not an ordinary person. This endurance made them, who were waiting for the summons, feel their legs go numb from standing for so long. As for those conventional principles, the most they could do was casually criticize him. What else could they do? When the matrons heard this, they were extremely envious of Gong Yimo. Extremely envious. Extremely envious. Thinking about the regent's looks and figure, what should they do if they wanted to drool? The princess was really lucky. His Highness was gentle and doting on her. It was the same before and after marriage. It made them wish that they could replace Gong Yimo with them. Chapter 778. This matter was even spread to be a romantic affair. In short, no one objected to this kind of unreasonable action. After Wuxi inquired about the news, he no longer held any hope for this country. This was a powerful country that was going downhill. Once the meet started, it was a little hard to stop. But in order not to get pregnant, Gong Dai secretly went to take medicine. This way, nothing would disturb their two-person world. This absurd situation continued for a few days. Gong Dai hugged Gong Yimo to rest on the bed. He was thinking in his heart, tomorrow was the big wedding. How should he give her a surprise? At this moment, someone reported from outside the door. "Your Highness, someone is making trouble in the streets." Gong Dai slightly raised his brows. This was a rare occurrence. Gong Yimo immediately jumped up. "Making trouble? Good, good. I'll go take a look, Gong Dai. You play by yourself." She was just complaining that her life was too relaxed. Seeing Gong Yimo's carefree look, Gong Dai shook his head. "Royal sister, You're abandoning me so easily? You're really heartless. Gong Yimo nibbled on his mouth. You haven't eaten enough these 2 days? I'm already full. Be good. I'll go out to rest and then come back to pamper you. Gong Dai couldn't help but lean forward and bite her lips, saying in a low voice, Be careful. The guard who was reporting at the door blushed when he heard this. Moreover, the princess was already at the stage of perfection. Shouldn't it be the people outside who should be careful? He didn't know how His Highness could speak in such a worried tone. Gong Yimo smiled sweetly. I know. After saying that, she ran off like a flower. Gong Dai looked at her cheerful back and his heart warmed. It turned out that he had been chasing after this kind of life for his entire life. With a lively wife, adorable children, and a stable country, every day would become very fulfilling. Gong Yimo held her waist as soon as she came out. In the past few days, Gong Dai had fully played the role of an incapable ruler who never attended morning court. He also ordered that since the emperor was still young, he could not wake up early, which would affect his growth and development. Therefore, in the future, the morning court would be held once every 7 days, and if there was any matter, it would be passed directly to the 6 ministers, who would then pass it to him. Gong Yimo blushed. She thought of the time when Gong Chung was still alive, almost every morning, and Gong Dai. Just because she complained that she couldn't sleep in with him in the morning, he gave such an order. He really had the potential to be an incapable ruler, Although she thought so, Gong Yimo was still happy. She didn't want to pretend to be virtuous and magnanimous to meet someone who doted on her so much. At this moment, the streets were already in chaos. Some elderly Buddhists followed Chu Xian and the others as they walked the streets. The monks were all wearing golden robes, carrying the image of a treasure. In Chu Xian's hand was a small silver flask filled with holy water. Behind them were a few older believers. They held scriptures in their hands and followed excitedly. The holy water brought by holy monk Chu Xian is really miraculous. After drinking it, I feel like my whole body is filled with endless energy. Yes, my knees don't even hurt anymore. Is it really that good? You'll know when you try it. He's a senior monk from India. The Buddha's golden light illuminates the world. Some people who didn't know what was going on also started to join the parade. In Dayu State, there were both Buddhists and Taoists, but the people in power didn't believe in Buddhism, so these two sects didn't develop quickly. Taoists were particular about having no desires, and some Buddhist masters only occasionally discussed Buddhist scriptures with others. Therefore, it was the first time such a large parade of sects in Dayu State. Gong Yimo sat on a roof to watch the show. She frowned when she saw that Chu Xian and the others had gathered a lot of people and were blocking the traffic. She saw them stop in the middle of the square. Greetings, benefactors. Chu Xian greeted the people behind him, and the crowd quickly returned the greeting. It was a grand scene. Chu Xian smiled kindly. This poor monk came from India to preach here. Thank you for coming. Buddha says to deliver all living beings from torment. This poor monk has the holy water from India. I hope it will refresh everyone's mind. Chu Xian and the others had already received Gong Dai's approval, so although the city guards weren't happy, they didn't interfere. Gong Yimo couldn't help but jump out and land on the canopy behind Chu Xian when she saw that Chu Xian was going to present them with the holy water, and the people were so happy. However, the person holding the canopy didn't notice. When he heard the crowd's cheers and looked up, he saw a person standing on top of the canopy. When he subconsciously let go of the canopy, it landed firmly on the ground and didn't move at all. Gong Yimo followed the umbrella-shaped canopy and turned around. Oh my, you have something good. Chu Xian was stunned when he heard the voice. When he saw Gong Yimo standing on top of the canopy and looking down, he widened his eyes in disbelief. The crowd didn't see who it was at first, but when they saw who it was, they cheered. Princess, it's the princess. The princess seems to have become prettier. Of course, the princess is a fairy from heaven. She's 20 this year and 18 next year. Hearing the crowd's discussion, Chu Xian was surprised that this woman's influence in Dayu State was much stronger than he imagined. What was going on? Were men and women equal in Dayu State? Of course, it wasn't equal. However, because of Gong Yimo's appearance, The atmosphere in Dayu State was much better than in other countries. Gong Yimo smiled and waved at the crowd. Then, she said to Chu Xian, who didn't look happy, "Holy monk, you haven't shown me your good stuff." She didn't hold back, but the way she pouted and acted cute made everyone think that the princess didn't mean it. Also, the princess didn't need to be polite to anyone. Chu Xian couldn't back down. However, he remembered that she was a woman after all. Even if she was good at martial arts, it didn't mean much. Could it be that she was also good at medicine? So, he reached out and handed over the silver bottle that was in his arms. However, he still underestimated Gong Yimo's ability. As soon as the silver bottle appeared, Gong Yimo waved her hand and held it firmly in her palm. He was shocked. Holy water needed to be diluted with water. This woman wouldn't drink it just like that, right? He wanted to stop her, but then he remembered that if this water wasn't diluted, it would make people feel drunk. It would be better the next day. If that was the case, he could let her drink it to prevent her from messing things up later. Gong Yimo opened the bottle and smelled the scent of herbs. She didn't know what he added in. So, she tilted her head back and drank a little. The moment she drank it, she felt sweet and excited. It made her feel like she was floating, as if she was going to be blown away by the wind. Chapter 779. Could it be an ancient stimulant? And it was an improved version. Because she did not feel any discomfort, she raised her head and drank the entire bottle. Anyway, her current body was absolutely impervious to poison. Seeing Gong Yimo drink all the holy water, Chu Xian was dumbfounded, but it was too late to stop her. Furthermore, he was a little anxious. Would something happen if she drank so much? When the time came, that man would definitely not let them off. After Gong Yimo finished drinking, her face turned unnaturally red. When the secret guard beside her saw this, he felt that it was dangerous, so he hurriedly went to report to Gong Dai. But he did not know that after he left, Gong Yimo threw the bottle and laughed out loud. The silver bottle hit the ground and made a muffled sound. She floated down from the imperial canopy and it landed on the ground, stirring up a lot of dust. She smiled sweetly and landed beside Chu Xian, saying slowly to him, "There is something in here that is not good for people's health." Gong Yimo's certainty shocked Chu Xian. "Female benefactor, don't slander me. This poor monk's holy water came from India, and if it is harmful, why did female benefactor drink all of it?" What he meant was that Gong Yimo was slandering him. Anyway, the holy water had been finished, so there was no evidence. Gong Yimo's face turned redder and redder. "Everyone will know once they see me. There is a stimulant in your water. Those who drank your holy water will definitely feel weak when they go back. It might even cause more terrible after effects. As for me, I am clearly impervious to poison, but I have been harmed by you." Her tone sounded a little coquettish, but her face was red, making people want to take a bite out of it. Chu Xian gritted his teeth and said, "Female benefactor, don't try to taint this poor monk's innocence. You don't have any evidence, so how can you insult this poor monk?" What he was thinking was that these people present were all Buddhists. Under the circumstances where there was no evidence, could it be that they would believe the words of a little girl? With that thought in mind, he rolled his eyes and became a little bolder. "We came from afar with friendly beliefs in order to deliver all living beings from torment and enlighten the world. Female patron, if you insult this penniless monk has nothing to say. However, the holy water is produced by the Bodhi tree's leaves. By questioning the holy water, you are blaspheming my Buddha. If you don't apologize today, you will be condemned by all the believers in the world." His words were serious, but at the end of the day, he just wanted to gain some benefits. If he could grasp the other party's mistake and use this opportunity to establish a Buddhist temple here, it would become the largest breeding ground in the Eastern Earth. Then, his name would be passed down eternally. Therefore, he took a step forward and said in a serious tone, "Benefactor, Please take back your words. Gong Yimo was forced to take a step back. She frowned slightly and looked dizzy. Chu Xian was pleased to see her like this. It would be even better if he could force her to do something irreversible. Unexpectedly, Gong Yimo pursed her lips and shouted, I told you that the holy water is poisonous, so what? They all listened to me. Chu Xian sneered inwardly when he saw that she had indeed been provoked to the point of speaking without thinking. This woman was really spoiled. She dared to say such things without any evidence. Did she think that these people were her parents and relatives? She was too arrogant. Unexpectedly, after the crowd fell silent for a moment, there was a strong reaction. Yes, we will listen to the princess. The princess must be right. There must be poison in the water. What should we do? Nothing will happen to us after drinking the water, right? The sudden reaction stunned Chu Xian for a long time. He thought that he had misheard because he didn't expect these people to be so blind. If this woman said there was poison, then there was poison. She didn't even want evidence. Were the people of Daiyu State all fools? While he was panicking, the people he brought with him were also confused and panicked. As they didn't understand the language of Daiyu State, they could only watch as the gazes of the people around them turned from respect to suspicion. Could it be that the master had done something that angered the crowd? Seeing Chu Xian's face turn green and white, Gong Yimo blushed and smiled proudly. Now you know. No, what? Chu Xian asked instinctively. Gong Yimo raised her eyebrows slightly. I said before that no matter what your motives are, you will not succeed in Daiyu State because the people of Daiyu State are my people. They are all mine. As soon as she said that, before Chu Xian could respond, a wave of cheers came from behind him. Yes, we are all the princess's people. We pledge our lives to serve the princess. The enthusiasm of the people seemed to be contagious as the cheers became louder and louder. This was a scene that these people had never seen before. They never knew of any country where a woman could receive so much trust and cheers. And this woman's existence had created a nightmare for them. Get out of here, you bad people. How dare you bully the princess? You are definitely not a good person. You even said that you were from India. Could it be that you were lying? A true master likes to be quiet. Why would you show your face in public like this? That's right. You even tricked us into drinking some holy water. Being ostracized by the crowd made it difficult for this group of people to move forward. Chu Xian's original plan was to get them to drink the holy water and then encourage them to believe in Buddhism when they were excited. Every time, they would receive an unprecedented response. This method had been tried and tested time and time again. Why did it fail inexplicably when they reached Daiyu State? Actually, it wasn't their fault. Their plan was very effective, but the downside was that Daiyu State had Gong Dai and the eccentric Gong Yimo. Gong Yimo was drunk, but she still smiled and waved at the crowd to express her gratitude for their support. Who knew that at this moment, a voice would suddenly interrupt? It sounded a little strange. Daiyu State is known as the strongest country in the East, but their actions are worse than those of barbarians. Gong Yimo narrowed her eyes and saw that it was Wu's. He had rushed over with his men. Seeing that his plan had been interrupted by Gong Yimo, he was burning with anger. Furthermore, he had already told the leader of Daiyu State that he would preach Buddhism in the city. Was he going back on his word? Gong Yimo smacked her lips. What do you mean by that? What position do you have to say that? Wu snorted. Did I say anything wrong? So Daiyu State is actually such a country. It has a good reputation, but it is so unbearable on the inside. Even those small countries know that it is shameless for a sister to have an affair with a brother. Gong Yimo was excited at this moment. When she heard this, the people were angry. She was also a little angry. She immediately took out the imperial edict that Gong Chang had given her from her space. When the imperial edict appeared, everyone knelt down. Wu's and the rest didn't know what was going on and still stood there. Chapter 780. Gong Yimo took out the imperial edict and posed. However, she could no longer see the words on it, so she passed it to a commoner beside her and let him read it. It was the first time that person touched the imperial edict, so he read it out fearfully. By the will of the heavens, my seventh daughter, Gong Yimo, is not my biological daughter, but the son of concubine Shui. I took pity on her young and innocent age and took her in as my biological daughter. Today, my daughter and my ninth son are in love, and their love is stronger than gold. I cannot bear to break them apart, so I hereby issue this edict to correct their relationship. After that person finished reading it, he was slightly shocked. The commoners were also shocked. This was actually the late emperor's edict, and he actually said that Gong Yimo was someone else's child. As an emperor, not only did he raise someone else's child, he even treated her as his own. But the strange thing was that when they heard this edict, not only did they not feel that the late emperor had embarrassed the imperial family, they even felt that this was a good emperor. Not only did he not hurt the innocent, but he also treated everyone equally. In the end, he was even willing to correct Gong Yimo's name. Such an emperor was hard to find even in 100 years. It was no wonder that the children he raised were all excellent and had truly benefited the commoners. So the commoners were moved and they kneeled down and cheered. Long live your majesty, long live. Gong Yimo got everyone to rise. She shook the imperial edict and said proudly to Wu's, "You heard it now. I am not Gong Dai's biological sister. We are together, so there is no relationship between us." When the commoners thought of how Gong Yimo had suffered because of this matter, they were furious that this group of people brought up this matter again. They all glared at them angrily. Wu's did not expect such a turn of events. In a hurry, he shouted, "How can there be such a coincidence? The edict in your hand must be fake. Wasn't it normal to create such a fake imperial edict for the sake of a good reputation? Who dares to fake the late emperor's edict? Aren't you afraid of getting your tongue pulled out by slandering me like this?" Gong Dai hurried over. Following his arrival, he brought a large group of imperial guards who quickly captured all the foreigners. His eyes were cold, and his face was covered with frost. Originally, he thought that their so-called preaching of Buddhism was just an ordinary discussion of the scriptures. He didn't expect that they were encouraging the people to parade through the streets and even gave the people strange things to drink. Speaking of this, Gong Dai nervously looked at Gong Yimo's red face. He couldn't suppress his anger. When he saw the confused look in Gong Yimo's eyes, he lowered his tone by an octave. In the end, he pinched her face in exasperation. "Girl, even if you've reached the transcendent state, you can't drink everything." She was really a treasure. He couldn't hit her or scold her. Even when she made a mistake, he didn't want to be fierce. He only wanted to coax her. Gong Yimo pouted. "It's fine. I'm immune to poison." As she spoke, she even patted her chest, which had become even fuller after giving birth to the baby. Gong Dai's eyes darkened, and then he became angry again. He was ready to vent all his anger on those foreigners. But Gong Yimo grabbed his hand and didn't let him move. Seeing that Gong Yimo's face was very red, Gong Dai controlled his temper and coaxed, "Good royal sister, wait for a while. I'll take you back after I've dealt with them." But Gong Yimo couldn't help but shake her head. "I'm no longer your royal sister." Gong Yimo proudly waved the imperial edict. Gong Dai couldn't help but laugh. When the people present saw this scene, they were also happy. After all, Gong Yimo and Gong Dai had gone through a lot to reach this stage. Everyone had seen it. Hence, many people laughed kindly. Gong Dai saw that Gong Yimo was around, and he couldn't maintain his usual cold face. He coughed and adjusted his expression, but he didn't expect that Gong Yimo suddenly knelt down on one knee. "What are you doing?" Gong Ju was taken aback by her sudden action. He was a little worried when he thought that royal sister would do something out of line every time she drank. Although she wasn't drinking now, her state was almost as if she had been drinking. Gong Yimo suddenly said loudly, "Gong Dai, marry me. I want to be your wife." When these words came out, it could be said that the crowd was in an uproar. What did they hear? The princess was actually proposing to the regent? That's right. The previous wedding was interrupted. It was time to do it again. Gong Dai's face instantly flushed red. He subconsciously looked around. Everywhere he looked, all the eager gazes lowered their heads. Only then did he heave a sigh of relief. After all, he wasn't 19 yet. It was his first time being proposed to in public. His cold face was about to crack. It seemed that royal sister was indeed not sober. He should bring her back. Otherwise, it would be embarrassing. Royal sister would be angry that he didn't stop her in time. Gong Dai opened his mouth. In the next second, he was attracted by the other party's focused look. Although her face was very red, her gaze was very clear. Looking at him, it was as if she was looking at the whole world. Gong Ju could hear the sound of his own heartbeat under such intense and single-minded gazes. The surrounding noises all disappeared. Gong Yimo held his right hand tightly and said slowly, "I'm very sober now. I want to tell you that I love you. I can't leave you. I want to be with you forever. We'll walk the bridge of helplessness together. We'll walk the road to life together. Are you willing?" Gong Dai's heart beat faster and faster. Gong Yimo's hand was boiling hot. It burned all the way to his chest. It was very hot. Gong Dai, do you love me? How could he not love her? He loved this woman so much. Gong Ju pulled her up and hugged her fiercely in his arms. Heaven and earth could be his witness. He had wanted to give her a surprise, but she gave him a surprise instead. This feeling was like a landslide, but it was happy and boiling. At this moment, he couldn't say a single word. He could only hug her tightly. At this moment, someone shouted, "Get married! Get married!" Then, more and more people egged them on. "Get married!" The crowd shouted more and more passionately. The two people who were hugging each other felt like they were in a whirlpool. The world was spinning, and they only had each other. In a daze, Gong Yimo asked foolishly, "Gong Dai, you haven't said if you're going to marry me or not." Gong Dai was so angry that he bit her neck. "Tomorrow is the wedding. Are you doing this on purpose?" Gong Yimo pretended to be shocked. "What? How about this? You propose to me again. I'll pretend to be very surprised." Gong Dai kissed her little mouth that made people love and hate her. He should have sucked on her lips long ago to prevent her from saying so many things that would shock him mentally. At that moment, screams were endless. But very soon, the crowd quieted down. This scene was very challenging for the ancients' tolerance, but it was undeniable that their hearts were beating very fast at this moment. The throbbing of love seemed to be contagious. "I'll marry you." After the kiss, Gong Dai held Gong Yimo's face and looked deeply into her eyes. He said each word clearly. "Also, I love you. Whether it's the bridge of helplessness or the path of rebirth, I'll walk with you." Wow! At that moment, the crowd's cheers almost overturned the sky. Chapter 781. Because she was in a good mood, Gong Yimo waved her hand and chased away those ambitious outsiders. Wuz and the others finally understood that they could not control the Dayu state. They quickly left without saying anything. Gong Yimo laughed proudly behind them. The departure of these people did not cause any ripples in the crowd, because they were already stunned by the golden boy and jade girl in front of them. Hearing that they were going to get married tomorrow, the crowd crowded around and loudly expressed their blessings. Enthusiasm was contagious. Gong Dai hugged Gong Yimo's waist and announced on the spot that starting tomorrow, the regent's residence would hold a banquet for 7 days. The whole country would be exempt from taxes for a year. It was a celebration. The joyous voices instantly burst out. The regent was mighty. The day of the wedding slowly arrived amidst the cheers of the crowd. The next morning, the streets were empty. Because of the regent's strict defense, the other countries did not know about the wedding and only sent gifts for the children's 1-month-old. But the regent was too evil. He sent people to deliver the wedding invitation, but deliberately waited until today to deliver it. This way, those people would know that Gong Yimo was going to get married. but they would not appear even if they had wings. Naturally, they would not disturb the wedding today. Gong Dai was very proud. After today, those people would give up. But even if they did not give up, there was no other way, because the royal sister was already his. In the noisy sound of gongs and drums, the people crowded around the bridal sedan and toured the city. Everyone was as happy as if they were marrying off their own daughter. Because there were too many people, the bridal sedan arrived at the regent's residence very late and almost missed the auspicious hour. Gong Dai had been waiting anxiously for a long time. In order to marry Gong Yimo, he did not know how long he had been waiting. This time, he was afraid that something would happen. Although it was impossible, his nerves were still tense. He only relaxed when he saw the bridal sedan and could not help but smile. "Princess, the prince is waiting anxiously," the matron of honor said with a smile outside the sedan. Gong Yimo was a little anxious when she heard this. She couldn't wait to meet Gong Dai at this moment. Finally, the sedan stopped and the curtain was lifted, revealing the bride wearing a veil. The matron of honor was about to say something, but Gong Dai had already bent down and carried her out. Gong Yimo exclaimed softly and hammered Gong Dai twice with her small hands. In return, Gong Dai teased her in a muffled voice. "Royal sister is shy?" Gong Yimo glared at him through the veil. "Can you not be so impatient?" "I can't not be anxious." Gong Dai smiled and hugged her even tighter. "I'm afraid that something will happen again, so I have to hurry." Gong Yimo was speechless, but the joy in her heart gushed out and filled her entire heart. After a moment of surprise, the guests expressed their understanding. The relationship between these two was really good. They were clearly together, but they were still stuck together like glue and as sweet as old friends. It was hard to imagine that a person like Gong Dai could laugh so happily. That happy appearance made the hearts of all the officials' wives beat nonstop. They wished that they were born a few years later. Thus, under everyone's gaze, on this joyous day, Gong Dai carried Gong Yimo step by step towards the wedding hall. On the way, he secretly told her a piece of news. Si Wuyin sent an urgent message. He said that the antidote we sent over last time was the goo poison antidote. Gong Yimo was delighted. "Really? That's great. In the future, no one will be able to use this thing to cause trouble." Gong Dai continued, "Royal sister, you still don't know, right? In order to commemorate and thank you, the other 3 countries have set up statues of you in their capitals." Gong Yimo proudly raised her chin and proudly said in his arms, "Yes, it's what I should do. I deserve it. Hee hee." A mischievous look flashed across Gong Dai's eyes. "Cough, and most importantly, today is our son's 1-month-old celebration. Double happiness. Are you happy?" As he spoke, Gong Dai put Gong Yimo down. Then, a palace servant smilingly carried a pink and jade-like toddler over. The toddler was looking at them with big eyes and licking his fingers. Gong Yimo was unwilling this time. Her eyes were round under the veil. "How can that be? No matter. No one can disturb our wedding day. Not even our son." Gong Dai listened to her jealous words and laughed again. Through the veil, he lovingly pinched her nose. The love in his eyes could drown her. "I'm lying, little girl. Our son is the witness of our wedding day." Gong Yimo was coaxed by his tone until her cheeks turned red. Only then did she feel that it wasn't good for an adult to compete with her son for favor. She pretended to lower her head in embarrassment. "Annoying. You only know how to bully me." Gong Dai leaned closer and said in a pleasant and elegant voice, "I'm going to bully you for a lifetime." Gong Yimo's heart pounded. She didn't understand why Gong Dai was still so flirtatious even though they were already an old married couple. Next was all kinds of etiquette. Then, they bowed to heaven and earth. After that, they were directly sent to the bridal chamber. No one dared to ask them to come out to socialize. Naturally, no one dared to force Gong Dai to drink. But the banquet continued. Everyone could indulge in music and song to their heart's content. Because the regent was in a good mood today, he definitely wouldn't find trouble with them. Gong Yimo was personally placed on the bed by Gong Dai. That gentle action instantly surrounded her with Gong Dai's cold aura. Gong Yimo suddenly felt a little nervous. Her hands clutched her skirt, and she didn't dare to move. There was no one in the room. The wedding nanny should have been there, but Gong Dai drove her away. Today's wedding was only for the two of them. Are you afraid? Gong Dai's smiling voice flowed in the room, making Gong Yimo more nervous. Fortunately, Gong Dai sat beside her with 2 glasses of wine. Now that we have a child, we don't have to do those formalities. But we must drink the wedding wine. Gong Yimo was slightly stunned. Aren't you going to lift the veil first? Gong Dai said mysteriously. No hurry. With that, his hand passed through the veil and handed a glass of wine to her lips. He coaxed her gently. Good girl, drink it. Gong Yimo drank it up in a daze. Then, she grabbed his other hand with both hands and sent another glass of wine to his mouth. You drink too. Gong Dai smiled and lowered his head to drink it up. The swallowing sound was so obvious that it was like some kind of hint, which made Gong Yimo more flustered. After drinking the wine, Gong Dai reached out to her, but he didn't take off the veil. Instead, he took off her clothes. Gong Yimo was shocked. Why are you? Gong Dai chuckled. He leaned over and whispered in her ear. Royal sister, don't you want to try closing your eyes in the bridal room? Gong Yimo was aroused by his voice and trembled all over. In the next second, her veil was taken off. But before she could see anything clearly, the veil was tied over her eyes and she couldn't see anything. Gong Ju gently removed her crown, allowing her long hair to cascade down. Then, he gently took off her clothes so that she couldn't hide. Gong Yimo's entire body turned pink. She curled up on the bright red bed sheets, making one's mouth dry for no reason. She felt Gong Dai's burning gaze, and because she couldn't see, the stimulation was even more intense. Royal sister. His voice was so low and hoarse. You should really see how beautiful you are. How irresistible you are. Gong Yimo heard his suggestive words, and her body trembled slightly, making one feel pity for her. But she didn't admit defeat. Her red lips curled up and she said stubbornly, If you want to do it, then do it. Do you think I'm afraid of you? When Gong Dai heard this, he immediately took off his clothes and pounced on her. The moment the two of them hugged each other, they felt as if the flaw in their lives had finally been repaired. Gong Dai's ink-black eyes quietly looked at the delicate face beneath him, and he sighed in satisfaction. Thank you for letting me love you. He said it emotionally. Although it was simple, it made Gong Yimo's heart palpitate. She couldn't help but take the initiative to lean forward and kiss him. Before he could react, she moaned softly and turned to the side with a red face. Since that's the case, I ask the Prince Regent to love this consort well, for the rest of my life. When Gong Dai heard this, his eyes shone brightly. He turned her face and forcefully sucked on her lips. He fiercely bit her lips while panting as he told her, As you wish, my princess. Chapter 782. Also known as Little Tuan Chi Yu's tragic life. Spring passed and autumn came. Day and night alternated. Unknowingly, the little dumpling from back then had already grown up. Moreover, his face was serious, and he looked a little old-fashioned. In the morning, politics, geography, scripture, arithmetic. In the afternoon, equestrian archery, kuju, vocal music, calligraphy. Now that Gong Qiyu was 7 years old, his personality was surprisingly determined. Not only did he persevere with such heavy studies day after day, but he also did very well. Back then, Gong Yimo said that the homework was too heavy and that it wasn't good and would affect the child's growth and development. However, little Gong Qiyu refused. There were even a few classes that he took the initiative to add, just so that he could develop in an all-round way and become an outstanding person like his father. As for others saying that his father was taught by his mother, little Gong Qiyu expressed that he was already 7 years old. How could they treat him like a 3-year-old child? On a summer afternoon, Gong Qiyu was practicing calligraphy while thinking angrily. Beside his hand was the calligraphy that his father had personally written. When the little one's gaze landed on it, there was a kind of almost obsessive worship. He had to work hard. As long as he was outstanding enough, his father would definitely value him more. With this thought, he was full of enthusiasm and wrote more than 10 big words. It was no wonder that he worked so hard. It was because he had fallen out of favor since he was young. Growing up, it could be written into a history of blood and tears. And the source of all this evil was his mother. His mother was very bad. When he was 3 years old, she snatched his milk cake. He went to his father to complain, but his father hugged him and said, "Chiyu is a man. Chiyu is a man, and men don't eat sweets. But if you want to eat, royal father will compensate you." Later, although he received his father's compensation, he didn't want to eat sweets anymore. He wanted to be a man. However, every time he saw his mother proudly eating desserts, he would still drool and then walk away proudly. When he was 4 years old, his sister was born. His father hugged his sister all day long. He was jealous and wanted his father to hug him. His father told him righteously, "You are the older brother. You have to give in to your sister. She is very fragile now, so you have to protect her well." After that, he never mentioned this matter again. However, one day, Lady Mother went to reason with Lord Father. She said that he liked children and didn't like her anymore. Lord Father hurriedly threw his younger sister to the palace servants and hugged Lady Mother for a long time to coax her. This was nothing. The most infuriating thing was that when he was 5 years old, he fought with his mother because he was competing for her favor. As expected, Imperial Father first coaxed Imperial Concubine Mother before lecturing him. "Chiyu, you're a man. Shouldn't you give in to your mother?" Gong Dai raised his eyebrows slightly and asked in a deep voice. Gong Chiyu said angrily, "Why didn't she give in to me?" Gong Dai told him very seriously, "Chiyu, have you forgotten that you are already an adult?" Gong Chiyu pursed his lips. But Imperial Mother is also an adult, right?" Gong Dai sighed and patted his head. "You're wrong. Your mother is still a child." After saying this, the father and son looked at each other, and there was a strange silence. When he was 6 years old, not only was his mother's status above his, but his little sister, whose nickname was Little Bean, also started to compete for favor. When he ate, he could only sit upright and eat by himself. However, his little sister refused and insisted that Lord Father carry her and feed her. She would even use a very soft and cute voice to call Lord Father. Every time she called him that, she would blink her big eyes and Lord Father's expression would soften. It was as if he wanted to hug his little sister and not let go. Gong Chiyu saw it. Every time he ate, his chopsticks would pierce the bottom of the bowl. However, he couldn't stand it anymore. There were others who couldn't stand it either. His mother put down the bowl and said angrily, "From tonight onwards, you'll sleep with Little Bean. We'll sleep in separate rooms." At that moment, Gong Chiyu saw the smile on his father's face instantly freeze. In the next second, he stuffed the Little Bean into his father's hands and moved closer to his mother's side to inquire about her well-being. That was called being gentle. Little Bean and Little Bean trembled. They looked at their mother, who was enjoying her husband's feeding, with envy, jealousy, and hatred. The two little ones looked at each other and saw sparks flying in each other's eyes. It seemed that if they didn't defeat Lord Mother, they wouldn't be able to obtain Lord Father's favor for the rest of their lives. Thus, a vigorous family feud unfolded. Little Bean used her looks and young age to pester Lord Father. Little Rice Ball used her eagerness to learn and be sensible to attract Lord Father's attention. During the day, Little Bean pestered Lord Father to teach him. Actually, he knew all that, but he liked to listen to Lord Father teach him again. Lord Father's teaching was very different from Grand Tutor's. When Grand Tutor taught, he always had to show off his knowledge, quote the classics, and deliberately complicate the knowledge points. However, Lord Father was different. With just a few words, he could summarize the main points and draw inferences, allowing Little Bean to learn new things. His only dissatisfaction was probably every time Little Bean said, "Lord Father is so amazing." Lord Father would stroke his head and lie to him. "What Lord Father knows, it was all taught by your mother." Gong Qiyu was speechless. At night, it was Little Bean's chance. He would always walk over to Lord Father to hug him. Today was, Lord Father, it's so dark at night. I want Lord Father to hug me to sleep. Tomorrow was, Lord Father, there's thunder. It's so scary. I want Lord Father to hug me to sleep. Even if there was a wet nurse accompanying him, he would still avoid the wet nurse to look for Gong Dai. Lord Father, I had a nightmare. I want Lord Father to hug me to sleep. Sometimes, when Gong Dai refused, Little Bean would start her performance. Her big eyes would be filled with tears, but she would look at Gong Dai with a pitiful gaze. This was definitely hereditary. Gong Dai expressed that he couldn't handle it at all. However, when it made him waver, Gong Yimo would snort coldly and pull his heart back. However, he was her child after all. Gong Yimo also had times when she was soft-hearted, so Little Bean would succeed once or twice out of 10 times. Gong Dai didn't know whether to laugh or cry in the face of the infighting in the family. In front of him was the passionate worship of the 2 children. Behind him was the resentful gaze of his precious wife. He couldn't eat well every day. He always felt that it wasn't right to continue like this. Until one day, Gong Yimo angrily ran away from home with Qiu Xingfeng. Only then did Gong Dai realize the seriousness of the matter and hurriedly ran out to look for them. Only then did the 2 little ones completely stop. They finally recognized a fact. First, Lord Father would always dote on Lady Mother the most. Second, without Lady Mother, they would also lose Lord Father. Therefore, when Gong Yimo came back again, the family of 4 stopped. The 2 little ones tried their best to act cute to keep Gong Yimo, afraid that she would run away. Little Bean and Qiu Tuanzi both accepted their fate. If they were ranked below Lady Mother, then so be it. After all, Lady Mother wasn't that bad. Looking carefully, there were quite a lot of advantages. Thinking of this, Gong Qiyu broke the writing brush. Fine, this piece of paper was ruined. Chapter 783. Spring went and autumn came again. Little Tuan Gong Qiyu was already 10 years old, and the little bean Gong Coco was 6 years old. However, as they grew older, Gong Dai fell out of favor. The reason was none other than that they finally realized how deep Gong Yimo was. Gong Dai was very busy, so the heavy responsibility of teaching them martial arts fell on Gong Yimo. Gong Qiyu was originally disdainful because he felt that his Lady Mother's martial arts were definitely not as good as his Lord Father's. After all, his Lady Mother only knew how to play every day, unlike his Lord Father who diligently practiced martial arts. However, after he was beaten to the ground by Gong Yimo time and time again, he realized that it was not a lie when people said that his Lord Father's martial arts were taught by his Lady Mother. Thus, he was very unconvinced and swore to surpass her. On the other hand, Gong Coco was more pure. She was a super foodie. Every time Gong Yimo made something delicious, she just had to act cute and Gong Yimo was very willing to share it with her. Those chocolates, puddings, and cream cakes were simply so delicious that their tongues were about to melt. Of course, all of this was attributed to Gong Yimo having a dessert encyclopedia that greatly satisfied their taste buds. Gradually, Gong Coco felt that it was not bad to share her Lord Father with her mother. No, no, no. Mother is much better than Lord Father. Lord Father will not allow her to eat desserts without restraint like this. However, what really made the 2 little ones start to completely change sides was the endless stories that Gong Yimo spoke of. The most common story in the palace was that Gong Yimo brought the 2 little ones to sit in the flower bushes, happily drinking afternoon tea and eating desserts while telling stories that they had never heard of before. At first, Gong Qiyu did not eat, but after being beaten up by Gong Yimo, he became obedient. Moreover, after listening to Gong Yimo's stories, those delicious desserts seemed to become unimportant. At this moment, Gong Coco's eyes were filled with longing. She held Gong Yimo's hand and asked repeatedly, "What happened after that? After that? Did they succeed in flying? Can something like an airplane really bring people into the sky?" Gong Yimo gestured for her to calm down. "They've definitely succeeded. The two brothers have also become world famous because of this feat. At this moment, Gong Qiyu was a little absent-minded. Seeing that Gong Yimo was only talking to his younger sister, Gong Qiyu got jealous and leaned forward to ask, Mu Fei, about the phone call you mentioned yesterday. I've thought about it for a long time. I keep feeling like something's missing. Oh. Gong Yimo smiled and asked him, what do you think is missing? Gong Qiyu said, this kind of wired phone can't be too far away. This way, it'll be a little useless. If only it could be transmitted wirelessly. Gong Yimo blinked. Qiyu is very smart. Of course there was a wireless phone later, but, she rambled on, and the two children listened attentively. A real world seemed to gradually appear in their minds. In that world, there were four-wheeled cars that ran faster than horses, houses made of reinforced concrete, ships that flew into space, and boats that went deep into the sea. All of this tested their imagination too much. Gong Qiyu even started to believe what Imperial Father had said before. He said that Mu Fei was a fairy who came from a faraway place. In other words, what Imperial Mother said was not fake, but a real world that people yearned for. Gong Coco also looked forward to a world where men and women were equal. Although she was a princess and Daiyu state was open-minded, in the stories of mothers and wives, not only could those women leave the house, they could also have their own careers. They could even ask their husbands to only have one wife. If they were not satisfied with each other, they could even agree to separate. It was really too beautiful. If only she could really go and take a look. When Gong Dai arrived, this was the scene he saw. The sun shone warmly, and in the garden where hundreds of flowers bloomed, his beautiful wife and two cute and intelligent children whispered together. What are you doing? When Gong Dai arrived, the three of them immediately shut up because Gong Yimo had made a rule that these things had to be kept a secret from Imperial Father. Otherwise, they would have to listen to stories. Therefore, the two little ones were very disdainful of Gong Dai, who disturbed them while listening to stories. Gong Dai was a little resentful. Seeing the children glaring at him angrily, he sat beside his wife embarrassedly and wondered if he was already old. Otherwise, why was he falling out of favor? He touched his face, which had not changed at all, and was deeply suspicious. Gong Coco had not heard enough, so she smiled and pushed Gong Yimo in Gong Dai's direction. She said softly, Mother, Imperial Father is here. Play with Imperial Father. But can you accompany Kiki at night? Kiki is scared. Gong Dai had a bad feeling when he heard this. This little girl was actually starting to poach people again. This was already the 10th time this month. Gong Yimo originally wanted to refuse, but when she saw the other party's round and longing eyes, all her refusal turned into the word, okay? Gong Dai's face darkened, but Gong Coco cheered. That's great. I like Mother the most. Gong Dai did not have the strength to complain. When they were young, the little girl who said that she liked him the most had a change of heart in front of him. Forget it, as long as they did not pester his wife tomorrow. At this moment, Gong Qiyu spoke. Imperial Mother, tutors was sick. Can Imperial Mother help me teach tomorrow? If Imperial Father's words were easy to understand, then Imperial Mother would be able to make these boring things very interesting. Just like when Imperial Mother talked about geography, she would also talk about the food and customs formed because of the geography. She vividly described it, as if she could let him see and taste it with his own eyes. When Imperial Mother talked about history, she was even more witty and opened a new chapter. He had a feeling that when other people talked about history, they were all inflexible, but Imperial Mother was different. She seemed to stand at the highest point and interpret everything from God's point of view, which could satisfy his thirst for knowledge. Gong Yimo saw that Gong Dai was eager to learn, so she naturally opened her mouth to agree, but her mouth was covered by him. The two little ones looked at Gong Dai angrily. Gong Dai felt that his status in this family had plummeted. Indeed, every dog has its day. Gong Dai gritted his teeth. Momo, have you forgotten what day tomorrow is? Gong Yimo blinked with a dumbfounded expression. Gong Dai was angry. Royal sister actually forgot about their 10th wedding anniversary. Don't tell me you really forgot. Gong Dai's face was very gloomy. The two little ones hurriedly ran away. At this time, Imperial Father could not be provoked. But provoking him meant that they were convinced. Really, Imperial Father was already an adult, and he was still a man. He actually dared to snatch Mother from them. How shameless. Gong Yimo's mind flashed and she sneered. I remember now. How could I forget? Gong Dai's expression eased a lot. However, he heard Gong Yimo ask tentatively, tomorrow is Keek's birthday? It seemed to be a few days away. Gong Yimo. Gong Dai was angry. His child was becoming less and less important to him. It was fine if he snatched his wife, but his wife only had the child in her heart and not him. Thus, the Prince Regent ran away from home. Chapter 784. Due to the fact that his status in the family was getting lower and lower, his two children were pestering his wife, causing him to fall out of favor, and his position in the royal sister's heart was uncertain. When his son was 12 years old, the regent waved his hand and made a decision that would affect his happiness, sex, for the rest of his life. He abolished the puppet emperor and made Gong Qiyu the crown prince. As for him, he went out incognito, and the crown prince took over. Gong Qiyu immediately refused. He went to Gong Dai to protest, but was cruelly rejected by Gong Dai. Then, he went to Gong Yimo to appeal. Imperial Mother, does Imperial Father not like me? Gong Qiyu had already grown into a delicate young boy. He inherited his looks from Gong Dai, but he also inherited some aspects from Gong Yimo, such as those eyes that seemed to be able to speak. At this moment, the young boy's face was downcast. His eyes were dim and stubborn as he asked this question, causing Gong Yimo's adorable heart to instantly overflow. She half-hugged her son and said angrily, "How dare he not like you? Mother will help you beat him up." Gong Qiyu, who was in her arms, rolled his eyes and said in a low voice, "Mother, I can't bear to leave. Mother, I can't bear to part with you. Can I not leave?" When someone who didn't often act coquettishly suddenly called her mother, the lethality was simply explosive. Gong Yimo's mind rushed, and in the next second, her mouth was covered by the elusive Gong Dai. Gong Dai's black, jade-like eyes were filled with anger at this moment. He knew this kid was going to ruin things. Relying on his height advantage, Gong Dai directly threw Gong Qiyu away and hugged Gong Yimo in his arms as he said coldly, "Brat, you're 12 years old, not 2 years old. You're not allowed to stick to your mother like this." Gong Qiyu was very angry when his father suddenly appeared to mess things up when he was about to achieve his goal. Father is already 30 years old. But isn't he still pestering Mother? With this big and small argument, Gong Yimo had the most headache. She was naturally not good at dealing with this kind of thing. At this time, she could only shrink her body and reduce her presence. However, the flames of war still burned her. "Your mother likes to be with me." Gong Qiyu refused to be outdone. "Imperial Mother also likes to be with me." Gong Dai's eyes burned with rage. He lifted the head of his wife, who was hiding in his arms, and said word by word, "Tell him, who do you like more?" Gong Qiyu shouted angrily, "Mother, you said you liked me." Gong Yimo felt a headache coming on. She looked at Gong Dai, who had a serious expression on his face, and then looked at her son. She swallowed her saliva. Thinking that Gong Dai was already an adult, she couldn't possibly argue with a child. So after hesitating, she opened her mouth slightly. Gong Dai instantly sensed her intentions and lowered his head to block her lips. Hey, hey, hey. Our son is still here. What was there to be afraid of? It wasn't the first time anyway. Every time Gong Dai couldn't win over the child, he didn't mind personally expressing his ownership. When Gong Qiyu saw this, his face was filled with anger. This again. Every time Imperial Mother's heart softened, Imperial Father would use his beauty to trick her. His cheeks turned red, and he retreated in defeat. However, even though he retreated in defeat, Gong Koko was still standing firm. Kiki blinked her ignorant eyes and ran over. Imperial Father, what are you doing? Why are you eating Mother? Upon hearing her daughter's voice, Gong Yimo quickly pushed Gong Dai away and glared at him. Gong Dai expressed his grievance. These little brats took turns to occupy her, and he hadn't had a chance to get close to her in a long time. Didn't they see that his eyes were green with hunger? Kiki, aren't you in class? Why are you here? Gong Koko definitely wouldn't say that her brother wanted her to come. She continued to act cute, her round face full of innocence, but it quickly turned into grievance. She hugged Gong Yimo's leg. Mother, you don't want us anymore? Aren't we going to become homeless children? Gong Dai instantly felt that something was amiss. This little girl was much harder to deal with than her brother, especially when she had a trump card. Gong Yimo instantly melted into water. She hugged her daughter and said with a smile, "How can that be? Kiki is Mother's little darling." Gong Dai indicated that his big darling was jealous. Gong Koko instantly used her trump card. Her big eyes were filled with tears as she raised her head 45 degrees to look at Gong Yimo. But Mother wants to leave with Father. Gong Yimo suddenly felt that there was no need to leave. The child was the most important. In the next second, Gong Koko was carried up by Gong Dai. She felt that something was amiss and struggled. Mother, save me. Gong Yimo was about to reach out when Gong Dai said sternly, Momo, I want to cultivate a relationship with my daughter. With that, he took Gong Koko away. Nothing bad would happen, right? But Gong Yimo's heart was big. Anyway, they were all blood-related. What could happen? In the end, Gong Koko stopped crying. She said angrily, Father, you're too much. Gong Dai raised his brows slightly. I want to make a deal with you. What deal? Gong Dai's eyes flashed. Didn't you say that you wanted to go out and play? As long as you promise Father to let your mother go, Father will let Kyuxingfeng go out with you. Really? The little girl's eyes suddenly lit up. When has Father ever lied to you? The little girl smiled so widely that her teeth could be seen and her eyes couldn't be seen. She kissed Gong Dai on the cheek. I knew Father is the best. Father, go on your honeymoon. Do your best, and give Kiki a younger brother to play with. Gong Dai thought that if he gave birth to another child, he wouldn't be able to hold a wife. Royal sister was becoming more and more motherly. She was no longer the royal sister who would compete with children for favor. If he gave birth to another child, he was afraid that royal sister would forget about him. No, he couldn't bear this grievance. This time, when he went out, he must make his presence known and let royal sister only have him in her eyes again. The father and daughter reached an agreement. Gong Yimo was quite puzzled. She wanted to ask Kiki, but Gong Dai carried her back to the room. What are you doing? Gong Yimo was puzzled. It was broad daylight. Why did he close the door? Gong Dai pursed his lips and looked at her with a mournful expression. Royal sister, how long has it been since you slept with me? Gong Chiu pestered him during the day and Gong Koko at night. How long had he been celibate? Gong Yimo blinked. She was just starting to feel like a mother. Could it be that she had neglected Gong Dai? She didn't seem to have done so. Gong Dai saw her confused expression and secretly gritted his teeth. It was impossible to rely on this delicate little wife to find her conscience. The last time he ran away from home, he had to come back on his own. He decided to be self-reliant and self-sufficient. Seeing Gong Dai push her down, Gong Yimo subconsciously said, It's not good for the child to know about this in broad daylight. Gong Dai bit her lip to vent his anger and said aggrievedly, Royal sister, you've changed. I'm no longer the most important person to you. Eh? Look at me. Gong Dai forced her to look into his eyes. Gong Yimo was stunned and was bitten again. Gong Yimo's lips were soft and bouncy. Once he bit her, he couldn't stop. Gong Dai began to focus on licking her lips. Gong Yimo's scorching body temperature was transmitted to her body, and her breathing gradually quickened. Gong Dai gradually became dissatisfied and kissed her more and more passionately. Gong Yimo couldn't help but let out small fragments of moans. In the midst of their entanglement, Gong Yimo heard Gong Dai's domineering declaration. "You'll always be mine alone. No one can take you away." Chapter 785. In the end, the two of them still left. Was it really a good idea to leave two children at home to take care of the family business while going on an incognito trip? Gong Yimo's heart softened when she thought of Gong Coco's pitiful crying. "Why don't we wait until they're a little older before leaving? They're so pitiful." Gong Dai secretly gritted his teeth. He didn't know who he took after. His two children were more scheming than the other. In front of the royal sister, they put on an expression of "I've been wronged, but I won't say it." In front of him, they used all kinds of tricks and extortion. This time, he was able to successfully bring his wife out. Who knew how many benefits he had promised? Thinking about it made his heart ache. They were clearly so adorable when they were young. "Don't worry." Gong Dai held it in for a long time before he said sullenly, "They're all grown up. They also need to temper themselves." Gong Yimo thought about it and agreed. Anyway, it wasn't like they weren't going back. Then, when she thought about how they were out, she instantly felt a little excited. "Then where are we going to play?" Gong Dai dotingly tapped her little nose. "We're going on an incognito trip to experience the people's lives." Gong Yimo glanced at him disdainfully, then became cheerful again. "Since that's the case, let's go to Jiangnan. The wealthier they are, the easier it is to breed corrupt officials. Let's get rid of evil for the people." Gong Dai looked at her energetic appearance and smiled lightly. "We'll do as you say." Thus, the two of them rode along the Grand Canal and slowly went south on the same horse. At the turn of spring and summer, the scenery was just right. With their outstanding looks, they were a beautiful sight wherever they went. Gong Yimo had no choice but to disguise herself and Gong Dai slightly. Although they were still very beautiful, they didn't have the feeling that people couldn't take their eyes off them. In the blink of an eye, they arrived at Jiangnan. They didn't go to the big cities, but to the small towns where the scenery was as beautiful as a painting. Gong Yimo had been having so much fun recently that she didn't want to go home. Her favorite thing to do was to go to those handicrafts and eat those unique foods. It smells so good. I think I found something good to eat." "Gong Dai, wait for me here. I'll go buy it." Before Gong Dai could say anything, his lovely wife smelled the aroma of the food and ran away. Gong Dai sighed and smiled as he drank his tea. Recently, he finally enjoyed the happiness of having only him in his little wife's eyes. His charm was indeed much greater than the children's. This street was very lively. There were not many people drinking tea in the tea shed where Gong Dai was, so it was relatively quiet. Suddenly, a person flew in from the door and smashed the tables and chairs. Everyone in the tea stall was shocked and ran away. If Gong Yimo was here, she would definitely do something about it. However, Gong Dai just frowned and continued to drink his tea calmly. He still had to wait here for the royal sister to come back. An arrogant and despotic voice was heard. "It's your honor that I took a liking to your daughter. You have to pay back what you owe. Don't be so shameless." The man who fell to the ground struggled to get up and was about to rush out again. His voice was furious. He held the broken leg of the chair, as if he wanted to fight with his life on the line. "Beast, give my daughter back to me." Then, a woman's sobbing voice was heard. "Father, save me." Gong Dai pretended not to hear. Since he wanted to gamble, he should bear the consequences. When the owner of the tea stall saw that the other party was making a ruckus in front of his door, causing the customers to run away, he muttered softly, "AI, what a disaster for the innocent." However, he did not dare to say it out loud. It was obvious that the other party's background was not small. The old man's failure to appreciate kindness made the scoundrel very unhappy. He kicked him again. At this moment, the young girl broke free from the scoundrel's servant's hand and rushed towards the old man. In her panic, she saw Gong Dai and her eyes lit up. The other party had starry eyebrows and bright eyes. Although his expression was cold, He exuded a noble aura from his bones. He was dressed in ordinary black clothes. Even if there were no embellishments, it was still very eye-catching. She almost did not think about it and begged him for help. "Young master, please save my father." She cried like a pear blossom in the rain, but it made Gong Dai slightly frown. The other party was so noisy and looked like a fox. If the royal sister saw this, she might be jealous. Therefore, Gong Dai took out a banknote from his sleeve. "Take this to pay off the debt. Don't bother me." His voice was surprisingly cold, making the crying young girl tremble. However, it was also surprisingly pleasant to hear. The young girl trembled as she took the banknote. On it was clearly written 100 taels. Her father only owed someone 10 taels of silver, and she was being dragged to pay off the debt. However, this quiet and handsome man did not even look at it and gave her 100 taels. The young girl's heart was thumping and many thoughts flashed through her mind. However, she did not have time to think about it. She quickly ran back and gave the money to the other party and said loudly, "This is 100 taels. Just now, that young master had already bought me. I'll return the money to you. Return my father's promissory note to me." At this time, the scoundrel was surprised. Someone actually spent 100 taels to buy a little girl. Although she looked good, she was not a courtesan in the city. He walked into the tea shed and saw Gong Dai. Gong Dai was just sitting there quietly and did not look at him. However, that cold and noble temperament made the scoundrel a little hesitant about the other party's origin. However, when he thought about it, what kind of noble person could there be in this small town? Therefore, he unceremoniously stepped forward and said loudly, "You want to buy her? 100 taels is not enough." When the young girl heard this, she angrily said, "My father only owes you 10 taels. Why is it not enough?" The scoundrel looked at her lecherously and said with a smile, "Little girl, do you think that I, Master Chiu, am a philanthropist? If you borrow money, you have to pay interest. Your father owes me 2 months. With the interest, you should pay me 300 taels." "What?" The old man sat on the ground and shouted in horror. "But you clearly said that you only want 10% of the interest." The scoundrel wearing fancy silk took out a piece of paper. "Here, it's written in black and white. You can't read. Who can you blame?" As he spoke, he stared at Gong Dai with his pair of small eyes. "If this little brother wants to be a good person, sure. Give me 300 taels and this little master will leave immediately." The young girl looked at Gong Dai with a pale face, but in the end, she did not speak. 300 taels, she would never see that much money in her entire life. Gong Dai's white fingers imprinted on the green jade teacup. These were all tea sets brought by the royal sister, as well as the best tea leaves and spring water. Unfortunately, these people spoiled the mood of tea tasting for no reason. Listening to the noise by his ear, Gong Dai stretched out his hand and a gust of wind snatched the loan receipt from the scoundrel's hand. The scoundrel was startled when he heard Gong Dai's cold voice. Scram! Anyone with a brain would know that this move of his was not ordinary. The scoundrel had never suffered such humiliation in his life. He wanted to make a move, but the other party was unfathomable, making him somewhat timid. He could only grit his teeth and speak. "Little brother, it's better to mind your own business. This is Yang City. It's not a place where you can behave atrociously." Gong Dai did not speak. The scoundrel said again, "Little brother, you're not a local, right? In Yang City, there's no one who doesn't give face to Master Chiu." Chapter 786. Gong Dai finally put down his teacup. In order to end this quickly, he was too lazy to waste his breath on these people. He lifted his finger and 3 drops of tea flew out from the teacup. With a wave of his sleeve, the water droplets shot towards the servants behind the bully. The few of them fell to the ground, not knowing if they were dead or unconscious. The bully was frightened, and the rest of the servants cried out in alarm and hurriedly ran away. They even forgot to say some harsh words. The surroundings finally quieted down and Gong Dai continued to drink his tea. The young girl was in a daze. She did not expect that the matter that was like a disaster to her and her father was just a simple matter to him. At that moment, Gong Dai's indifferent look, in her heart, was like a celestial being who saved the world, unfathomable. Gong Ju's slender fingers moved, and the IOU turned into ashes at his fingertips. After doing all this, he didn't even move his clothes. He was still indifferent and noble, and didn't even glance at the people around him. The young girl swallowed her saliva. She only felt that for such a person, even the mud under his feet was noble. She did not care about her gambling addict father, and chose to kneel in front of Gong Dai. Gong Dai frowned and threw a piece of silver to the tea stall owner to compensate for his loss today. However, he did not care about the young girl at his feet. He was thinking, why is royal sister not back yet? Young master, the young girl called out timidly. Her beautiful face was mesmerizing. She lowered her head and did not dare to look at him. She could hear the sound of her own heartbeat. Thank you, young master, for helping my father repay his debt. From now on, I am young master's woman. Whether I am a slave or a servant, I will follow young master's orders. The old man also got up on his own. Seeing that Gong Ju had helped him, he ran over to thank him. He also saw that Gong Ju was handsome and generous. His daughter looked like she wanted to entrust him with her care. Although the old man was reluctant, he still went with the flow. If benefactor does not mind, my daughter will be benefactor's concubine. Father! The young girl heard this and her cheeks turned red. Her heartbeat quickened. Faced with such a turn of events, Gong Dai was impatient and rejected. I'm 30. The old man and the young girl were both stunned. They didn't think that the young master who looked at most 20 years old was actually 30 years old. The girl had just turned 14. The young girl pursed her lips and thought to herself, this young master is so talented. Even if he's 30, he's still out of my league. Therefore, she suppressed her shyness and said, this little girl is willing to serve the benefactor. Gong Dai frowned. I already have a wife. I don't need another woman. The girl's face paled. She was beautiful and had a good figure. There were many people in Yang City who wanted to marry her, but she never liked those people. She also had a father who loved gambling. She didn't expect that when she rushed to become her benefactor's concubine, her benefactor would reject her without even thinking about it. But when he thought about it, his benefactor's wife was probably around this age. She was a middle-aged woman. Even if she was still charming, how could she compare to her tender age? Therefore, she gently bit her lips, and her charming face became even more alluring. This little girl doesn't need any status. Her father was shocked. He didn't understand why his daughter suddenly took the initiative. The other party looked noble, but his background was unknown. She didn't even want a status. Wasn't it too unworthy? How could the young girl not know her father's thoughts? But she had a feeling that the man in front of her was very noble. Even if she didn't have a status, it wouldn't be a loss. Moreover, she had confidence in herself. She would definitely win her benefactor's pity and beat that old wife. Gong Dai's brows tightened. His body emitted a heavy chill. The other party's unreasonable pestering had exhausted his patience. The young girl was shocked. In the next second, she was suppressed by the other party's aura and couldn't speak. At that moment, she even had a feeling that the other party would kill her. Why? She widened her eyes in horror. She didn't do anything wrong. But in the next second, a gentle breeze came and saved the two of them. The warm inner strength dispersed the chill on Gong Dai's body. His body relaxed, and he suddenly said to the door, why are you only back now? The girl's charming voice came, like a spring breeze. My curly duck slices were all made on the spot. It took some time. The young girl widened her eyes. This voice, could it be the benefactor's wife? No wonder her benefactor was so heartless. It must be because his wife was nearby, and he couldn't bear to see her sad. But which man didn't cheat? She went to the pub to sell flowers and had seen a lot of it. Since her benefactor valued his wife's feelings, then she would start with her. Presumably, her benefactor's status was noble and his wife was virtuous. In order to pretend to be magnanimous, he would accept her, right? With this thought, she raised her head and looked towards the door with a pitiful face. At that moment, it was as if a flower was blooming. A girl who looked like she was in her late 20s stood in front of the door. She was wearing a light green gauze dress. Her whole person was like a willow in the early spring, delicate and gorgeous. She was carrying an oil paper bag in her hand and looked over with a smile. It was as if she was a living painting. Her eyebrows were raised and her eyes were bright. Her temperament was remarkable. That appearance shocked the young girl to the spot. How could there be such a beautiful woman? It was as if she was glowing. She must not be her benefactor's wife. Gong Dai saw that Gong Yimo had removed her disguise and knew that the royal sister must have been here for a while. Seeing someone pestering him, she felt uncomfortable and purposely removed her disguise to show off her power. Being so jealous, she was just too cute. Gong Yimo was very satisfied with the effect of her appearance. The people in the tea stall were stunned. She walked in with a smile and said in a charming voice, "Husband, who are they? Why are they kneeling to you?" At that moment, the young girl heard the sound of her heart breaking. She had thought that her benefactor's wife would at most be a middle-aged woman. She didn't expect that she was only a few years older than her and was a devastatingly beautiful woman. She was discouraged and a little angry as she said in a small voice, "You are my benefactor's wife? My benefactor has just bought this little girl. This little girl is willing to serve you as a slave." Gong Yimo slightly raised her eyebrows and walked closer. "Oh, what should I do? I don't like my husband to have other women by his side." Her jealous words were said very naturally, but when everyone heard it, they felt that it was right. Such a beauty should have special privileges. The young girl didn't expect the other party to admit that she was jealous in front of her husband. In a panic, she couldn't help but cry towards Gong Dai. "Benefactor, what should I do? I really want to repay your kindness." Gong Dai was numbed by her mushy words. He quickly stood up and walked towards Gong Yimo. Gong Yimo squeezed his hand. "My husband is so cruel. This girl is crying so pitifully." Gong Dai looked at the young girl at his feet. "Does it have anything to do with me?" As he said that, he didn't care about the young girl's pale face and walked out with Gong Yimo. "They are so noisy." Gong Yimo secretly laughed. "You're not moved at all?" Gong Dai held her out of the door and said as if he was relieved, "My heart is with you. How can I be moved?" Gong Yimo smiled like a flower. Chapter 787. Gong Dai and Gong Yimo held hands as they walked on the streets. It was an inappropriate gesture, but both of them were gentle, as if they were one with heaven and earth. When others saw them, they felt that this was how they should be. After they left the small town, they went to Kargalik, the largest and most prosperous city in the area. Kargalik's prosperity was comparable to the capital, but it was less luxurious and more extravagant than the capital. The weather was perfect, so Gong Yimo brought Gong Dai to shop. After all, they had more money than they could spend. "Gong Dai, look at how beautiful this dress is. Kiki will look beautiful in it." Even though both of them were in disguise, their innate beauty was pleasing to the eye. The lady boss of the largest clothing store in Kargalik admired them quietly for a while. When she saw that they had taken a fancy to something, she hurried over to promote it. She was about 30 years old, with a voluptuous figure and a soft voice when she spoke. "Young lady, you have good taste. This is a new design. It's made of silk, and the embroidery on it was made by more than a dozen embroiderers over a month. Although it's expensive, it's really good." Gong Dai wouldn't spoil her mood. He knew that royal sister just liked the process of shopping. He was happy to satisfy her desire. Besides, the quality of the dress was acceptable and could barely match his wife. "You'll look good in it too. Let's buy it." Hearing Gong Dai's words, Gong Yimo was a little embarrassed. I'm already so old. This pink color. The lady boss was amused. She waved her fan and teased, "Young lady, you're so funny. I don't think you're even 18 yet." Gong Yimo was a little embarrassed. Ever since she took the poison, her appearance hadn't changed. She had always looked like an 18-year-old. Gong Dai even said sadly that he was going to grow old in the future. "No, I'm already in my 20s. Gong Yimo knew that no one would believe her, so she thickened her skin and made herself look younger. But the lady boss was still shocked. "I really can't tell. How do you take care of yourself?" Her face was full of curiosity and thirst for knowledge. When Gong Yimo didn't know how to answer, there was a sudden noise outside. Gong Yimo turned her head to look, only to see a group of people suddenly appear on the wide road. They forcefully opened the road. Behind them, a luxurious sedan slowly walked over. Gong Yimo took a look. Although the other party's palanquin couldn't be compared to her princess palanquin, it was so luxurious that it was blinding. Gong Yimo asked in surprise when she saw that the commoners had no choice but to give way and leave the road empty. They were angry but did not dare to say anything. Who is this person? What a grand display! The lady boss also glanced at him and revealed a look of disdain. He's the biggest local tycoon in the 3 provinces of Jiangnan. He made his fortune by relying on the canal. Later on, he had more and more money. He was so rich that he was overflowing with oil. All the officials in Jiangnan had been bribed by him. Therefore, he was used to running amok. He would throw money at people for no reason, and no one would care. This time, I'm afraid he has something to ask the county magistrate to come over and give gifts. When Gong Yimo heard this, she didn't have much of a reaction. When the water was too clear, there would be no fish. Moreover, this was a golden mountain and a silver nest. How could there be so much unsullied? However, if he was taking money that offended the heavens and went against his conscience, then don't blame them for being ruthless. Gong Dai immediately saw the eagerness in Gong Yimo's eyes. His little wife was really full of energy at all times. Seeing that Gong Yimo was curiously going over to watch the show, Gong Dai bought the clothes and also bought a few more. The lady boss rarely saw such a generous customer. One must know that these clothes were not cheap. Each one was worth thousands of gold taels. Even the county magistrate and his wife would only take one piece at a time. She praised with a smile. Young master is not only handsome, but also dotes on his wife so much. I'm so envious. Gong Dai maintained his usual aloofness, but the slightly upturned corners of his mouth revealed his good mood during this period. While he was waiting to pack up, a commotion suddenly came from the other side. Gong Dai looked over and saw that his little wife was surrounded by people. How could this be? Gong Yimo was a little confused. She only came to watch the show. How could she be surrounded? Moreover, there was a short man with a mustache circling around her. As he circled her, he spoke. Top quality. It's really top quality. This will definitely satisfy my lord. It was no wonder that he was so surprised. Although Gong Yimo used a disguise technique to hide her appearance, she was still a great beauty from the inside out. Being in a high position for many years made her exude a kind of awe-inspiring noble aura. Not only was she beautiful, but she was also an inviolable beauty. What's wrong? The curtain of the sedan was lifted and a big fat man raised his voice to ask. The short man hurriedly went forward. Master, this little one found something good. When Gong Yimo heard this, she clenched her small fists angrily. You're the one who's a good thing. When the fat man heard this, his interest was raised. He walked down from the sedan and personally looked at Gong Yimo. As he looked, he nodded. Good, good. Your dog's eyes lit up for once. You caught such a beauty. Bring her away. Wait, what are you doing? When Gong Yimo saw that Gong Dai had come, she signaled him to not move first and then asked with a frightened face. In broad daylight, you want to snatch a commoner's woman? The fat man still had some patience towards beauties. He chuckled and his eyes narrowed into slits. This master has plenty of money. Why would I need to snatch? Where's your family? I'm going to buy you. Gong Yimo couldn't help but raise her eyebrows. Buy me? Why?
The fat man raised his chin and looked at her with his nostrils.
Do you think this master can't afford you? Tell me, where's your family? Gong Dai couldn't hold it in anymore. This damn fat man actually said that he wanted to buy his treasure. When Gong Dai was angry, the surrounding people felt the pressure and subconsciously avoided him. The fat man immediately noticed such a handsome man and felt the other party's aura. He was slightly stunned, but then he remembered that there was no such person in the whole of Jiangnan. It was obvious that there was no such person. You're from her family? When Gong Yimo saw Gong Dai's gloomy face, she hurriedly rushed over and held his hand. She said softly, "He's my husband." The fat man didn't expect her to be married. She wasn't a virgin, so her value would be greatly reduced. But even so, she was still a rare beauty. He still wanted to buy her first. So he said arrogantly, "Then name a price. This master wants to buy her." The surrounding commoners felt a little pity for this couple. What a perfect couple. It seemed that they were going to be separated. After all, this local rich man had money and power. Gong Yimo held on to Gong Dai and said with a smile, "I'm afraid you can't afford me." After all, her husband owned a bank. There's nothing in this world that I can't buy with $1 million. Chapter 788. That fatty had never been looked down upon like this before. After he finished speaking, he waved his hand. "Someone come." A person quickly walked out from behind the sedan with a box in his hand. The fatty opened the box in front of everyone. The neatly stacked gold ingots made everyone exclaim in surprise. He enjoyed the feeling of flaunting his wealth. He snorted and said arrogantly, "Here are 500 taels of gold. It's enough for you to buy dozens of beauties. This lord will use 500 taels of gold to exchange for one of your women. How about it?" Everyone was once again shocked by Qian Baiwan's wealth. Gong Dai looked at the 500 taels of gold and pursed his lips. If it wasn't for the royal sister secretly holding him back, he would definitely use the gold to open a few holes in his body. Gong Yimo was having a hard time holding back her laughter. Her husband was the one who printed money, but someone actually ran in front of him and wanted to throw money at him. Gong Dai's inner drama must be very exciting right now. Seeing that the husband and wife were very calm, the fatty was embarrassed. How could an ordinary person see so much money? Even those officials didn't say that they didn't put this box of gold in their eyes. Especially Gong Yimo's gaze. It seemed to be a bit forceful. The fatty was angry. Think it's too little? Must he use money to make them open their mouths? Thus, he waved his hand and another servant ran over. When he opened the box in his hand, everyone couldn't help but exclaim in surprise. It was actually a box of ocean pearls. Each of them was round and shiny. This was a good thing that couldn't be bought with money. Its value far exceeded that of the box of gold. Do you see it? This is a good thing. In the mainland, you can't even buy it with money. With this, it's enough for you to spend your whole life extravagantly. How is it? You've never seen so much money, right? He looked at Gong Dai proudly, hoping to see the other party's greedy expression. However, the other party only gave him a condescending glance, which made him feel a chill all over his body. After the fear, he was furious. This pretty boy is taking advantage of me? Don't be so shameless. This lord's money is enough to buy your mother, not to mention your wife. His big mouth almost reached the sky. Gong Dai couldn't take it anymore. He took out something from his sleeve and pressed it on the man's face, instantly leaving a red mark. No one expected that the couple would dare to make a move. It was the bearded shorty who trembled slightly when he saw the words on his master's face. Qian Baiwan was furious. He wiped his face and said, "Someone come, kidnap the woman, and beat the man with silver." However, he was pulled back timidly by the short man. "Dog slave, what are you doing?" Qian Baiwan roared, but he saw that the people around him were looking at him strangely. What? The mark on his face was ugly? Shorty pointed at Fatty's face and stammered, "Master, there seems to be a money mark on your face." Now, there were 7 official seals on the banknotes, and the one on Qin Baiwan's face was the last seal. It was engraved with the words, "Public access to the 4 kingdoms." Qin Baiwan didn't react in time. When he did, his eyes widened. "You actually dared to carve your official seal? This is a capital offense that will cause 9 generations of your family to be executed." Gong Dai looked at him as if he was looking at an idiot. The next second, Fatty knelt down with a plop, because he suddenly thought that if someone really did carve their official seal, they wouldn't dare to show it off like this unless they didn't want to live anymore. Then, there was only one possibility. This seal was real. Moreover, this money seal must be in the hands of someone with high authority. No wonder this man didn't show any fear. It was because he was a noble. "Master, this little one has eyes, but failed to recognize Mount Tai. Please spare my life." When he shouted, the people around him also knelt down. Their hearts were filled with uneasiness. This was a case of the rich bumping into the one with the money and being smashed to death by the money. The surrounding people didn't realize what was happening and also knelt down. Gong Yimo found it interesting and asked, "Fatty, you just said that you wanted to offer a beauty. Who do you want to offer it to?" That Fatty immediately put away his previous complacency and became a little fearful. At this moment, his brain was spinning rapidly and finally he asked tentatively, Replying to Madam, this little one wants to get a share of the official salt. I want to find a beauty bribe, pay, offer it to the regent." Gong Yimo looked at him and thought that he was really smart. No wonder he could become the local rich man of the 3 provinces in Jiangnan. He actually guessed the identity of Gong Dai with a seal and then deliberately said this to please her. Gong Yimo couldn't help but smile. Qin Baiwan instantly felt that he had guessed correctly. He had heard people say that the regent had made a private visit incognito. It must be them. So he said with a pale smile, "This madam is so beautiful." This little one heard that there was only one lovely person by the regent's side, so he had such a crooked idea. "Please don't argue with a bastard like this, little one." Okay, don't flatter me." Gong Yimo was overjoyed. She turned to Gong Dai and acted coquettishly. "Husband, seeing that he still has a repentant heart, let's not argue with him. Who told me to be so good-looking?" Gong Dai looked at her smiling face and couldn't help but smile gently. He smiled, and the people kneeling on the ground felt relieved. Then they heard Gong Dai say coldly, "Relying on your money, you bully people in the city. I sentence you to compensate every merchant on this street with 10 taels of silver. Are you convinced?" Gong Dai loosened his mouth and made Qin Baiwan tremble. He quickly squeezed out a smile and looked very obedient. "This little one is convinced." Gong Dai glanced at the crowd and smiled coldly. "I will send people to investigate. If you rely on your money and do something outrageous, naturally someone will deal with you. Get out." Yes. I will get out." The fat man didn't dare to wipe the sweat on his forehead. He didn't even sit in the sedan chair and left gloomily. The people behind him quickly followed. The whole process was very quiet, like a rat crossing the street. They were far less arrogant than when they came. Qin Baiwan walked far away before he dared to stop and look back. Seeing that Gong Dai couldn't be seen, he let out a long sigh of relief. It was so scary. Why did he casually meet such a big shot? At this time, the short man also knew that he had done something wrong. Before he could think of an excuse, he was ruthlessly kicked by the fat man twice. "You dog slave. Are you trying to get me killed? You really dare to stop anyone?" The short man felt wronged. Didn't he usually do this? Money could make the devil turn millstones. As long as they liked something, they would buy it with money. He didn't dare to resist and let Qin Baiwan vent his anger. After Qin Baiwan had vented his anger, he secretly asked, "Master, what is the background of that young master just now?" He had never seen his master kneel so quickly. Even the county magistrate didn't have the face to do this. Speaking of this, Qin Baiwan's face turned pale. Fortunately, he was smart and guessed the other party's identity at the last moment. Otherwise, he, Qian Baiwan would have become a pauper today. Chapter 789. So he fiercely glared at Shorty. You better restrain yourselves in the future. Don't go out and cause trouble with me. If it wasn't for the fact that I buried you well in my ancestral grave, I would have been killed by you. Seeing Qian Baiwan like this, Shorty felt even more strange. Who could actually make the master so afraid? Qian Baiwan saw that he was still acting stupid, and his hand itched to give him another slap. The fat on his face was still trembling. It was obvious that he was still in shock. So stupid. Isn't it obvious? That person is. As he spoke, he pointed his finger at the sky. At this moment, Shorty's face changed color from fright. This. He actually wanted to instigate the master to buy the other person's wife. Wasn't that person's wife the legendary Princess Gu Guo? Gong Yimo was in a good mood after being pestered like that. She took her clothes with Gong Dai and continued to walk in the spring scenery. No one knew where they went, and no one knew what they looked like. Later on, the bad guys gradually didn't dare to do evil anymore. Because every time they did evil, a young girl would appear and beat them until they cried for their parents. If they schemed against the young girl, then they would be in trouble. Because there was a cold-faced, crazy wife-protecting devil behind the other party. They would definitely suffer the consequences. The common people gradually knew that those two people were the regent and Princess Gu Guo, because every time they appeared, they would disguise themselves. So although they knew it was them, no one had really seen them. Slowly, the number of people who did bad things decreased. In the past, every once in a while, there would be stories of someone who committed some crime and was killed by the princess. Later on, the bad guys would tuck their tails between their legs and behave themselves. In short, with the princess and the regent around, the world was peaceful. They also left behind legends that people yearned for. Late one night, the husband and wife had just finished doing something embarrassing and were resting. Gong Yimo touched Gong Dai's chest and asked softly, Gong Dai, we have been married for 18 years. Do I still have charm in your heart? She was a little unhappy because she liked this man very much. Would this man be a little tired of her unknowingly? Gong Ju quietly looked at the little face in his arms that was exactly the same as it was 18 years ago. Not only her face, but her body was still as delicious as it was 18 years ago. However, he was gradually aging. Although because he had reached the stage of perfection, the aging was very slow and not obvious. But there were changes. He was really afraid that in a few decades, he would become an uncle while the royal sister would still be so fresh and tender. Would she not like him anymore? With that thought in mind, he pressed on her again and asked face to face, Where's royal sister? When I grow old, will you still like me? The light accentuated his facial features. At this moment, his thin lips curved dangerously. His shiny black hair intertwined with his sexy collarbone, and his hormones were exuding freely. Gong Yimo was dazzled by the beauty in front of him. I used to think that when people are together for a long time, they will slowly become family, and there will be no more passion. She hooked her arms around Gong Dai's neck. Her eyes were bright and misty as she said sweetly, But I feel that I will never get tired of you. I think, if we can live for another 100 years, I won't feel tired of you either. When Gong Dai heard this, his heart was filled with sweetness. He could not help but want to press down on his lovely wife again. However, Gong Yimo hugged him tightly. Gong Ju could hear her heartbeat, feel her softness, and her unreserved feelings. It was inexplicably touching. When I see you, I want to kiss you and hug you. When I kiss you, I want to go deeper. When you leave for a while, I miss you so much. With you, I have neglected the children, but I have no choice. I just can't bear to part with you. I want you. Gong Dai smiled and kissed her earlobes. He said hoarsely, I want you too. Gong Yimo blushed secretly. Seeing that Gong Dai wanted to do it again, Gong Yimo was half reluctant. However, she thought of something and suddenly grabbed his hand. She muttered softly, You haven't told me if I'm still attractive to you. Gong Dai smiled and bit her nose. Little fool. As he spoke, he directly told her if she was still attractive. In the end, when he was in a daze, he said softly in an exceptionally seductive voice as he moved. When it comes to you, I won't be able to restrain myself even after 100 years. When Gong Yimo heard this, she became even more aroused. The two of them fell deep into lust and experienced an incomparable satisfaction. In this world, there was love that lasted a lifetime. It was just very difficult. However, she was lucky to have met it. Another year passed. Gong Yimo and Gong Dai held hands and boarded the ship. At this time, everyone was there. Gong Coco was already 15, and Gong Chiyu was 19. Kiki, you have to listen to your brother. Gong Yimo smiled and pinched Gong Coco's face as she softly reminded her. Gong Coco cried and nodded. Mother, will you come back? Although Gong Yimo had been outside for the past few years, she often came back. However, if she left now, who knew when she would be back? At this moment, the old man patted Gong Coco's head. Girl, you have to know that the stage of transformation is just the beginning. If your mother can comprehend it earlier, her potential will be greater. As long as you work hard, you will catch up to your parents sooner or later. Gong Yimo laughed. We're just going to try. If we fail, we'll come back. Look at you. It's like we're going to be separated forever. They were going because the old man said that when he went out to sea a few years ago, he saw the Tianji map left behind by his ancestors on an isolated island. He couldn't comprehend it himself and might not be able to see a more mysterious world in his lifetime. However, Gong Yimo was different from Gong Dai. Gong Yimo wanted to stay with Gong Dai forever, so she wanted to find the Tianji map. If they didn't find it, they would come back. If they found it, it would be another opportunity. Qiu Xingfeng rubbed his head. Is there really another world other than this one? Gong Yimo smiled mysteriously. Master, don't worry about that. Practice martial arts well, and take good care of Kiki, okay? Qiu Xingfeng nodded. Don't worry. I will urge Kiki to practice martial arts, and then I will reach the stage of transformation as soon as possible. On the other side, Gong Dai said to Gong Chiyu, when you reach the stage of transformation, you'll be able to see a trace of morality. There have been people who broke through the sky and left, and there have been people who died from exhaustion. Once your mother and I go out to sea, there will be countless changes in the future. So now that I'm leaving the country and your sister to you, can you be a good monarch and brother? At this time, Gong Chiyu had grown to the same height as Gong Ju. His handsome face was cold, and when he heard Gong Ju's words, he said proudly, You guys go and have fun. I'll definitely do better than you. Gong Dai smiled. Then I'm relieved. After explaining everything, Gong Dai and Gong Yimo stepped onto the huge ship together. Everything in the future was unknown, but as long as this person was by their side, they had nothing to fear. Gong Dai and Gong Yimo smiled at each other, holding hands. They couldn't tolerate anything else. Watching the ship leave, Gong Coco leaned on Gong Chiyu's shoulder, feeling very sad. Father and mother have such a good relationship. I hope that mother will come back, but I also hope that they can see through the mysteries of heaven and truly stay together forever. Gong Chiyu's eyes were a little red. It's okay if they don't come back. When we reach the stage of transformation, we'll go find them. MM. Chapter 790. Your Majesty, it's the middle of the night. A loyal palace servant reminded Kim Yun softly. Only then did Jin Yun rub the space between his eyebrows. He closed the memorial and went out for a walk. The palace servants hurriedly followed him. It must be said that the most diligent person in the four kingdoms was their emperor. Not only did he attend morning court every day, he often flipped through memorials until late at night. However, they also understood that His Majesty was only doing this to keep him busy. Kim Yun walked and unknowingly walked up to the star-plucking platform. This was the first tall building he built with cement and steel for a mower. Later, Immerse brought Gong Dai here and said that he built it well, just like the star-plucking platform in the legends. Unknowingly, 30 years had passed. Immerse and the others never returned after going out to sea. He really missed them. The sky was dotted with stars. Kim Yoon suddenly remembered what Immerse said before. He said that there wasn't only one world. In the long river of history, there were countless worlds and countless parallel spaces. If he could, he really hoped. He really hoped that he could live in a world where Immerse existed, but without Gongju. Kim Yoon smiled bitterly and shook his head. He asked in a low voice, "How is the Crown Prince's recent governance?" The Crown Prince was actually the younger brother his mother gave birth to later. Yoon-jin regretted it too late and died early. Wang Jing remarried, and the second wife treated the child badly. Kim Yoon found out in time and saved the child. That child survived and eventually became Kim Yoon's younger brother, the current Crown Prince. Hearing the Emperor's question, the palace servant said respectfully, "The ministers all say that the Crown Prince is kind and wise. He is a monarch who keeps what he has achieved." As the palace servant spoke, he looked at the noble emperor and sighed in his heart. Their emperor treated people kindly and was handsome. People who wanted to marry him flocked to him. But his majesty was infatuated and refused to marry. For a person who did not come, he did not have a single concubine, let alone an heir. Hearing his words, Jin Yoon nodded. He was also a little tired. "Let's go back." The night was cold like water, elongating his shadow and giving off a sense of loneliness that was difficult to dissolve. The next day, Kim Yoon woke up. He opened his eyes. The light was too bright for him to get used to. He looked around and suddenly sat up. What was this place? He looked around nervously. Although he was frightened, he had been the emperor for so many years, so he quickly calmed down. Then, a memory that did not belong to him suddenly appeared in his mind. Year 2000? Sea City, Hua Nation? He seemed to be like the characters in the novels, who died and then reincarnated in another body. However, the difference was that he had reincarnated 1,000 years later. He was now called Jin Shiyao, and he was the only son of the famous entrepreneur, Jin Shi. He was now 17 years old, and he had an annoying stepmother and an even more annoying stepmother's younger sister. Her name was Gong Yimo. Kim Yoon felt like he had been possessed. When he rushed down the stairs impatiently, his stepmother and sister were both there. His father had already gone to the office. At that moment, everyone stopped what they were doing. When they saw Kim Yoon, they were trembling with fear. His stepmother, Su Ru, was Jin Shan's secretary. She was also preparing to go to the office, but when she saw Kim Yoon, she suddenly became nervous. The young master of the Jin family did not like her, and he disliked her daughter even more. They had a huge argument last night. Now that she was leaving, would the young master bully her daughter again? At that moment, Gong Yimo sensibly tugged at her mother's clothes and whispered, "It's okay. You should go." Then, she glanced at Kim Yoon, who was standing on the stairs, and her eyes dimmed. "I can get along well with the young master." Su-ru nodded. Although she was worried, she still left. Jin Xiao did not like her, and she would only make things worse if she stayed. At that moment, Kim Yoon woke up from his daze. It was really Immerse. She looked like she was 12 or 13 years old. She was exactly the same as when he first met her. However, she seemed to be very afraid of him. One side of her face was still a little swollen, and the servants around them were also looking at him carefully. Gong Yimo was a little nervous. Her brother had a bad temper. When her uncle was not around, he would often bully her. This was also the reason why Gong Yimo left the Jin family and lived alone after she obtained the inner space. The shadow of her childhood was always with her, and Jin Xiao was her nightmare. Therefore, she was self-reliant at the age of 16. Because of the inner space, her life was quite comfortable. It also helped her mother, so her life in the Jin family was not so awkward. But now, this little girl was only 12 years old. Seeing Jin Xiao staring at her with a terrifying gaze, Gong Yimo stood up and called out softly, "Good morning, young master." Her large eyes flashed with vigilance and determination. No matter how old she was, no matter which time period she was in, Her personality was the same. Kim Yoon did not know how to describe his feelings. The memories of the original body and his own memories were still fiercely conflicting. In order not to scare Gong Yimo, he replied with an N, hesitated for a moment, and went downstairs. The servants quickly served the young master's favorite shrimp porridge and looked at their young master strangely. They felt that the young master was very strange. He did not lose his temper when he saw this burden early in the morning. After being scolded by the old master for drinking last night, didn't he slap her to vent his anger? Gong Yimo also felt that it was strange. Today, this young master actually responded to her. Could it be that he thought of other ways to mess with her again? Kim Yoon naturally did not know what others were thinking. He just ate the porridge woodenly and digested everything in his mind with difficulty. Looking at the tableware in front of him, although it was so unfamiliar, it had a strange habit. And could it be that God really heard his inner voice and pitied him for being unmarried his whole life? So he really sent him to a world where there was only and no Gong Dai. Moreover, was his stepsister. They had a relationship where they could openly interact with each other every day. But Kim Yoon had a headache as he thought about his previous memories. His body seemed to be a bad person, and he did all kinds of evil things. Last night, because he tried the powder that his friend gave him, he was so excited that he went into shock. He also came at this time. If he did not come, with this young master's personality, Mo's life would be even more miserable in the future. Because he did not like her stepmother, he bullied a little girl. This kind of person did not deserve to be Mo's brother. But now that he had come to this body, all the sins had become his. What should he do? Mo must hate him. Kim Yoon was in a dilemma. Only then did he realize that Gong Yimo had been standing there the whole time. He was shocked. Why are you standing there? Sit down and eat. His tone was dry. He did not want others to find out that he was a fake, but he also could not bear to be fierce to Mo, especially when he thought about the slap on her face from this body. He wanted to slap himself. Chapter 791. His gentle tone shocked everyone. Did the sun rise from the west today? Young master actually allowed this burden to eat at the same table. Gong Yimo wanted to say that she had eaten well, but she didn't dare to go against young master's wishes. After all, she was an orphan living under someone else's roof. If she didn't listen, her mother would be in a difficult position. Her mother saved her from her aunt's house, so she couldn't cause trouble for her mother. So she sat down obediently. She was only 12 years old, but she acted like a little adult and was very cautious. Kim Yoon's heart ached when he saw this. He saw that Gong Yimo only lowered her head to eat the dry bread in front of her, and he was a little anxious. He turned his head and said to the servant, "Go and get a bowl of porridge for her." Gong Yimo was stunned. Did young master poison the porridge? The servant was even more stunned. Young master didn't want him to poison it, right? That's against the law. Seeing that the servant didn't move, Kim Yoon frowned slightly. The domineering aura of a ruler suddenly appeared, and it made the servant's heart tremble for no reason. "Didn't you hear me?" His cold voice made the servant tremble, and he quickly ran over. Gong Yimo straightened her body and stared at him with her round eyes. After all, she was still young, and it wasn't easy for her to hide her emotions. She just stared at him foolishly. Those round eyes were moist, and it made his heart itch unbearably. Kim Yoon really wanted to reach out and touch her head, but he couldn't. He would definitely scare her. He could only settle for the next best thing. He placed a bowl of milk and egg soup in front of her. He didn't dare to be too gentle and said dryly, "Eat it all." He knew that Gong Yimo liked to eat milk and eggs. Gong Yimo felt that her jaw was about to drop to the ground. What should she do? Young master seemed to have gone crazy. When uncle came back, would he be angry? She obediently ate the egg soup, and as she ate, she glanced at him. He still looked handsome, and he was still a bad person. But what exactly was different? Neither of them spoke. One of them was digesting the memories, while the other was trembling with fear and secretly taking precautions. The servant did not even dare to breathe loudly. The young master today was too strange. Finally, after dinner, it was time for Gong Yimo to go to school. She glanced at Kim Yu nervously and said softly, "Young master, I'm done eating. I'm going to school." In his heart, he heaved a sigh of relief. He could finally leave. The main thing was that the other party was acting too strange today. She was a little afraid that he had some dirty tricks up his sleeve. School? Kim Yoon quickly put down his chopsticks. Only then did he remember that they were still students. This era was too beautiful. Girls could go to school, and Immerse was now in the first year of her first year at his school. He was in his third year of high school. He was overjoyed and put down his chopsticks. "Sure, let's go together." Gong Yimo's heart was very complicated at this moment. She looked at Kim Yoon in shock. She thought to herself, "He's here. He'll definitely make a move on me on the way." However, she couldn't go against his words. Otherwise, she would be ungrateful. Kim Yoon saw that the other party frowned but didn't resist. He was in a good mood. He quickly abandoned the breakfast that he hadn't eaten and went out with Gong Yimo. Gong Yimo saw that he couldn't wait and felt a chill in her heart. She pinched her jeans that were a little white. She was actually still afraid. After getting into the car, Gong Yimo felt like she was sitting on pins and needles. It was her first time taking the Jean family's car to school. Usually, she would squeeze in the bus. This car was indeed a famous car. Not only was the exterior beautiful, but the interior was even more gorgeous. Kim Yoon saw that Gong Yimo was nervous. He was also quite nervous. Although he had memories, this was his first time taking a car. This feeling of traveling at lightning speed was like opening the door to a new world, especially the scenery he saw along the way. It completely subverted his imagination. The buildings could be so tall, and there were so many people. There were also all kinds of new things that dazzled him. After being an emperor for a few decades, he was already able to keep a straight face even if Mount Tai collapsed. After looking outside for a while, he couldn't help but look at Gong Yimo. No matter how new everything around him was, the one that attracted him the most was still Gong Yimo. Today, Immerse was wearing a white t-shirt and jeans. Her hair was tied up in a ponytail. She looked very pure and cute. The only flaw was that her little face was tense, as if she was ready to fight at any time. Kim Yoon was a little discouraged. It seemed that he still had a long way to go before he could get Immerse's approval. However, when he thought about how he could see her every day, and how the person he had been thinking about all his life was by his side, this kind of happiness was not something that ordinary people could understand. He opened the fridge according to his memory and took out a bottle of fresh milk. He opened it and passed it to Gong Yimo. He remembered that during breakfast, Immerse didn't even touch the glass of milk because she was afraid of him. Gong Yimo was shocked by his action of passing the milk to her. If they weren't in the car, she would have stood up again. What was in the milk? She took it, but she didn't drink it. Kim Yoon saw that although she looked quiet, she was actually very alert. He felt a little anxious. He wanted to get along well with her, and not this way of getting along that seemed very close but was actually very far away. The car was silent. Kim Yoon thought of another topic. "It's so far away. How do you usually go to school?" Immediately, he wanted to slap himself. In his memory, his father had given Immerse a car. However, under his intimidation, those people didn't dare to drive it. Therefore, Immerse could only go to school by herself every day. At a young age, she had to wake up very early and walk very far to get to the bus stop. Sure enough, once he finished speaking, Gong Yimo glanced at him. She thought to herself, "Is this person mocking me on purpose?" Kim Yoon coughed softly to ease the awkwardness. Before she could reply, he quickly said, "Wait for me after class. We'll go back together then." Gong Yimo's body stiffened again. She didn't expect him to say that again. "We'll walk together every day from now on." Gong Yimo clenched her teeth. She knew that resisting wouldn't do her any good, but at this time, she couldn't bear it anymore. "I can walk by myself." Kim Yoon was stunned. He didn't expect her to reject him. Gong Yimo looked at him quietly. Her big eyes were filled with tenacity and a trace of fear. I don't know what you want to do, but young master, please say it. Kim Yoon then realized that she thought he said that with malice. Every time he thought of this, he wanted to chop his original body into pieces. What did he do to make little Immerse so afraid of him? Kim Yoon frowned. After a while, he imitated the original body's tone and said, "Don't be so nervous. I just think that it's fun to raise a little sister. It's like raising a pet. What? You don't want to be raised by me? Or do you want me to treat you like before?" His words made Gong Yimo skeptical, but if it was true, being treated as a pet was better than being treated as a punching bag. She clenched her small fists and placed them on her knees, whispering to him, "What if you get tired of raising me?" Chapter 792. Gong Yimo looked serious. "If you get sick of me one day, can you ignore me and find a new pet?" Her stubborn and aggrieved look made Kim Yoon's heart ache. How could he get sick of her? He was going to spoil her for the rest of his life. But he definitely couldn't say that now. So he pretended to raise his eyebrows arrogantly. "We'll talk about it when I get sick of you." As he spoke, he looked at the milk in her hand. "You have to finish the milk, understand?" Gong Yimo nodded. Under his intense gaze, she drank the milk in small sips. No matter what he wanted to do, she could only deal with it as it came. When they arrived at school, Gong Yimo felt that she could finally breathe a sigh of relief. Who knew that she would be surrounded the moment she got out of the car? Most of the people in this elite school were very busy, but there were also some who were bored, especially some girls who came from rich families and were at the age where they were full of energy. When they saw that Jin Qiao was handsome and generous, they were all attracted to him and surrounded him all day long. These people didn't know how bad young master's personality was. They all thought that he was a very domineering CEO and cool, but Gong Yimo knew that this person was rotten to the core. Although, today was a little different. "Who are you? Why are you in the same car as young Master Jin?" A senior girl asked Gong Yimo loudly. Although Gong Yimo was young, she had always worked hard when she was young, so she was tall and thin. The other party wasn't sure of her age and subconsciously targeted everyone who appeared around young Master Jin. Gong Yimo didn't say anything because young Master Jin had said before that she wasn't allowed to say anything about their relationship. Seeing that she didn't say anything, another girl went overboard and pushed her. "We're asking you a question. Are you mute?" They came from good families and were usually sought after, so it was hard for them to be good-tempered when faced with Gong Yimo's silence. Gong Yimo was caught off guard and fell backward. Then, Kim Yoon caught her. Sensing Immerse's thin and weak body, Kim Yoon was furious. This body of his had a pair of thick eyebrows. When he glared at people, it was enough to make them tremble. "What are you doing?" Kim Yoon's voice was full of anger. That heavy deterrence was far from what these students had seen before. At this moment, when they saw that Kim Yoon was angry, all of them were like mice that had seen a cat. It couldn't be helped. The young master was usually straightforward, but if someone dared to offend him, they would die a horrible death. A girl who had a good relationship with the young master smiled and tried to smooth things over. "Senior Jean, don't be so fierce. We just want to ask her some questions. It's rude if she doesn't answer." Her tone was coquettish as she tried to move closer to Kim Yoon. Kim Yoon glanced at her and froze her on the spot. "Who are you? How dare you tell my sister what to do?" "Little sister?" Everyone was stunned. Could it be that the eldest young master was interested in this? At this time, most of the brothers and sisters were recognized by themselves. It was just that this girl was a little young. But thinking about it was just thinking. Since Kim Yoon had spoken, they didn't dare to refute. They only wanted to wait until the eldest young master was gone before dealing with this girl. Kim Yoon knew what they were thinking at a glance. Because of his anger, he had always been kind to others. But at this moment, there was a hint of hostility in his eyes. "I said, If any one of you dares to touch her, I will definitely return it 1,000 times. You better remember what I said." His serious tone sent chills down everyone's spines. They couldn't help but be on guard. Only then did they take a look at Gong Yimo. They were shocked. They didn't expect the eldest young master to think so highly of her. There was jealousy, but there was more fear. Since the eldest young master had said so, even if they had a few guts, they wouldn't dare to do anything. Gong Yimo was in Kim Yoon's embrace. Seeing him suddenly stand up for her, she didn't know what to feel. But she knew that this was the first time someone stood up for her. She didn't expect that it was someone who hated her. Gong Yimo suddenly struggled out of his embrace and said with her head lowered, "I'm going to class." After saying that, she turned around and left. This was a sign of her being flustered. If it was any other time, she definitely wouldn't do such an unreliable thing. Kim Yoon looked at her back and suddenly smiled. It was a good thing that Imo had a reaction towards him. He still had to work harder. When the group of people saw the eldest young master reveal such a gentle smile, it was as if they had seen a ghost. What happened to the eldest young master? Did he really like this little girl? After sitting down, Gong Yimo finally heaved a sigh of relief. Everything that happened this morning was too unreal. She didn't dare to believe it. Forget it. Don't think about it. Class is more important. The morning class passed just like that. When it was time for lunch, Gong Yimo held the meal card and went to the canteen. This school was a famous aristocratic school in Sea City. The food and clothes were all very exquisite. But Gong Yimo was very poor. She didn't buy a school uniform and didn't have much money for food. Her mother would give her money, but the eldest young master deliberately took away most of it. He said that a poor person should look like a poor person. So Gong Yimo could only eat vegetarian dishes. Because the food was exquisite, the vegetarian dishes were also small. Most people ordered 3 to 4 dishes. One dish was a little shabby. Gong Yimo heard someone snickering. She knew that the other party was laughing at her, but she was already used to it. People should learn to be grateful. She was lucky to be able to study in this school and enjoy an education that ordinary people couldn't get. So she took a small bowl of vegetables, a small bowl of rice, and free soup and found a corner to sit down. The senior students' canteen was on the 2nd floor, so the 1st floor was filled with children around her age. At this age, most of the children didn't know how to control themselves. Their likes and dislikes were very obvious and changed quickly. Moreover, they were very competitive. Everyone was wearing exquisite school uniforms and holding the latest phones and computers. But Gong Yimo didn't have anything, so they subconsciously ostracized her and looked down on her. When Gong Yimo sat down, the people around her deliberately walked away, as if they could humiliate her. Gong Yimo sighed in her heart. In her opinion, her classmates were very happy. Moreover, they really didn't know what the suffering of the common people was. She couldn't imagine the predicament of eating pickled vegetables and rice every day when she was young and still not being full. To be honest, the food in front of her was already very good. She lowered her head and ate, but others couldn't stand it. A girl wearing a school uniform and a crystal hairpin walked step by step in leather shoes and said loudly, "Who allowed you to sit here? My mother said that beggars all squat on the ground to eat." As she spoke, everyone looked over. But she felt proud because she felt that she was doing something that others wanted to do but didn't dare to do. So she enjoyed the worship with a clear conscience. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.